more esoteric ramblings from the crazy mouth of Ramey, we can say, what do you do with that stuff? So those of you that have had me in class before or even online, either in leadership or org behavior, some of the theory things that I focus on will be very similar to what has happened before. But the readings that we have through either Maidment's annual edition or the Pearson Newstrom book of readings will sort of tend to move us off in different directions. So there we go. That's just kind of an overview. Welcome. This is a new cohort of the MBA program. The challenge in this physical environment is that we're relegated almost to a structural mode of operation. Now, some faculty are much better at maneuvering this interaction with people to make it a lot more interactive, and I continue to struggle with that, and I don't know. At once upon a time when I was teaching interactive TV at another school, we had a policy where about 25 or 30% of the time I would go to the downstream sites live. And it was really interesting because whenever I was in this site, everybody was here and everybody in the downstream was asleep. I hope you're not asleep. And then when I would go to the other location, everybody at the home campus would go to sleep. And we literally had one time where one of the folks in the class was in the back of the room, hat on his head with his feet up on the counter, just asleep. And we all got real quiet, and all the technicians started going this way to everybody. And so everybody in the class got really, really quiet. And about 5 minutes later, this guy wakes up and everybody says, "Hi, welcome back." So stay with us. Even when I'm just out there in la-la land and talking about something that makes absolutely no sense to you, see if it makes sense. See where the disconnection and the connection is, that kind of thing. So, again, welcome. MBA programs have flavors. Back in my day, in that crazy time of the 60s where it produced a lot of schizophrenic individuals, where my kids ask me, how can I be a Marine and a hippie at the same time? And that's probably why I'm still crazy, So I don't know. But it produced a lot of weird things out there in the corporate world. And one of those was, if you look at CEOs across the world now and see where that 55 to 65 level is, half of them are out there trying to still love the world to death because they're still dropped out, tuned in, and turned on, or not, as the case may be. And the other half are probably some of the most ruthless wealth builders, stockholder creators in the world. Why? Because the MBA programs that they went to were all tailored to kick ass, take names, and make money. And most of us went to school on the GI Bill, and so we had been sort of indoctrinated into that field. And for those of you that know me, this is going to sound old hat, but for those of you that don't, real quick, one of the things about me is that I grew up in a fundamental Christian family in the Bible Belt, in a military family, joined the Marine Corps, had to get a signature from my parents to do so, volunteered to go to Vietnam because my brother was there. I wanted him to come home. Then I came back and stayed crazy and went through officer candidate school. So what does that tell you about the way that I look at the world? That's the way I managed. That's the way that I taught. At the time, I had taught several sections of leadership and team building at the police academy in Lewiston, Idaho in 1980, and went to a conference, a couple of them, and met a man named Warren Bennis, who you will hear ad nauseum from me about because he's certainly one of my heroes, and literally changed my life in the way that I taught management, taught leadership, and the way that I felt about it. Came back to Lewiston, Idaho, taught yet one more class for the police academy, and the director of the police academy called me a couple of days later and said, "I don't know what you did, but you're never coming back again." And so obviously the way that I look at management was different. A long time ago, most MBA programs had this flavor. You knew that's what you were going to get. Today, it's not quite so true. You can go to MBA programs that are marketing-oriented and entrepreneurship-oriented, like Pepperdine. You can go to numbers-oriented programs like Stanford and MIT. You can go to really hard-hitting CEO behavior management programs like the Wharton School of Business and Dartmouth and those kinds of things. Or you can come here, and the flavor, as I understand it, and talking to the other people that teach the various MBA classes, and we talk to students and listen to our alumni and say, did we do what we say we were doing? The flavor is not a bunch of theory, although you're going to get tired of my theoretical, esoteric, up in the clouds kind of stuff. And after you're through with me, rest assured, the rest of them are very practical, and you'll know some numbers and some specific ways of behaving. But the flavor of the EOU MBA program is application and practical use. And it's extremely strong that way. Obviously, not having the name brand of the Harvard MBA, you might not expect a couple $100,000 salary when you leave here, but we have people that have hit 150, you know, upon leaving the MBA program. It's what you want, what you can make, and where you take it, you know, too. So you're going to get a lot of very practical-oriented stuff. For the MBA program? Yeah. Good. Welcome. I'm just welcoming people, so continue to welcome you. So that's kind of the flavor of it. So let me stop right there. I'm going to do some other things tonight that I ordinarily don't do in this class. But the first thing that I would do is sort of give you a little history of the school's place in the business college world. Some of you have heard this spiel from me before, and some of you not. And if you haven't, it's certainly good for you to know about the product that you're going to walk away with. So the first thing that I would say, once again, is welcome here. Second is that the basic flavor of what I think you could expect over the next year and a half or two, whatever modality that you've chosen to play in here, whether you're doing the short one or the long run, that's where you can go with that. Second thing, and I'm going to look out at both audiences, the screens, and then out here, and ask another question about the product that we have, both at the undergraduate level and the undergraduate level. I don't know how far to take you on this. And obviously, you've made the choice to be here. Thank you very much. It's really nice to have you because it's a fairly competitive world out there with education changing in the way it is, all the way from face-to-face education to that virtual education. Of course, if you're willing to pay the price tag with it, with places like Phoenix, or even you can get a Harvard MBA, but you're going to pay $2,000 to $3,000 per class for that. So we can think about an affordable but really solid education. Now, if I say International Assembly of Collegiate Business Education Programs, raise your hands if you've heard me talk about that before. Not many. Okay. Well, let me tell you about us being graded to do what we do. Okay? At the undergraduate level, this institution has chosen to have an external organization grade us. How good are you at what you do? And that's great for legislatures. That's great for a consuming public. That's great for you when you walk away from here. Now, the difference is that there is another one. There's two different ones that are real major players in this marketplace. And one is called the American Assembly of Collegiate Schools of Business. And they're the what I call the big guys. You know, they're the Harvards, the Wharton School of Business, the school that I have my undergraduate degree from, North Texas State University, although it's now University of North Texas. You know, when I got my degree, it was one of the top 25 in the nation. Now they're down a little bit, quite a bit. But that's the places where people that have either big schools, big state money, big reputations, or the capacity to do all that doctorate level research, and they command an audience, and you know, students have guaranteed jobs when they leave. But they play in the library a lot, and they do a lot of esoteric research that may or may not be relevant, you know, and so we wonder about that. And then there's another group of schools out there in the United States that really, really pride themselves on the time that they spend with students. And Eastern Oregon University is one of those. Traditionally speaking, we have classes that, I mean, I've taught at Washington State University, and, you know, the difference between a class of 80 people or 200 as opposed to even a large class for us at 35 is significant, you know, in the time that you get to spend with the faculty member. So we choose to play this game a different way. What time do we have with students? What is the result of what we say we're going to do Do you really walk away with information that is relevant out there in the business world? And so this organization called the International Assembly of IACB, International Assembly of Collegiate Schools of Business Education. That's the group that grades us. And we have full accreditation or marks of superiority to do that. And that's kind of a neat thing to know when you walk out there in the other world and say, I've got my degree from an accredited, a professionally accredited school. We also are regionally accredited by the organizations that are sponsored by and governed by the Department of Education. Department of Education has another governing body Council of Higher Education, something CHIA, but they tell people how to grade colleges and universities, and we have on an annual basis, we're doing something to talk to these agencies about how well we do what we do. So we get graded on that, okay? Those of you that have been in our undergraduate program on campus were probably asked to take a test. At the time that y'all were here, it was probably the one called Major Field Achievement Test. Last year we shifted that, and we're now doing a very similar test, but it's completely online. And that way, what I would say to you, and something that would be informational to you to know about, is that prior to that, we were collecting information from maybe 20% of our students to grade ourselves. And we weren't getting information from some of y'all out there in the online classes in our outlying areas. And starting this year, we have contracted with an agency that will be grading and allowing us to use this completely online at the undergraduate level. So we will start getting a heftier, more complete grade of how we accomplish our results. That's good news for you to know that the strength of our even graduate program is built on how strong the curriculum and the knowledge base that we play with at the undergraduate level is. So it's a great, absolutely great program. And in spite of management problems, which everybody has anyway, anywhere, no matter what kind of organization you go to, and we hope to explore some of that this quarter, the magic of being here at EOU is that you've got a relationship between faculty and you that I haven't experienced anywhere else other than the school that I was at before, and that was Lewis Clark State College over in Idaho. Not Lewis Clark in Portland, but the other Lewis Clark, the little one over in Idaho. But there's a magic to me, in spite of relationships that we all have trouble with. Sometimes you don't get along with faculty, sometimes you do. Sometimes you disagree with them completely, and sometimes you love what they say. What are you, accounting major, marketing major, and where are you at in terms of affinity, the way that you look at the world? But it's a great program. Welcome here. So thanks for being here. Comments, questions, observations before I continue on. Get tired of that, Rhino. Sorry. I had a student once upon a time in the middle of the class. He raised his hand and he said, "Gerry." I said, "What?" And he said, "Questions, comments, observations." I said, "Thanks, you make an A for the night." You know, so it's not that easy. Just for those of you that have been with me before, just a little word of what happened this summer. In all of my summer classes, I gave 5 A's. So life is changing, you know, for those of you that are expecting to walk out of here with an A. Do the work, we'll be okay. If you've got a problem with that, if you're graduate school bound and you're looking at doctoral programs, you need to call me soon and say, "Look, I don't want anything less than an A, and whatever it takes me to get there in terms of exchanging information between all of us, you want to keep pushing that button until you get there." You know, if this is where you're at, the corporate world is not quite so inclined to say you've got to have the A. They just want to see the paper at the end and can you produce results for them. You know, so I hate grades anyway, so but we'll play with that. So, y'all awake out there? Hello? I didn't even bring my class rosters to call roll tonight. I assume that everybody's here or not. Wow, 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 here. Last time I looked at the rosters, I had 25 on one and 15 on another. Is that right or wrong? That sounds like a...
The class isn't listed anywhere. Online it's listed in Ackerman 105, which is why the 4 of us were late. So I don't know are other people who don't know where the class is.
And I don't know what's happening up there too either. Thank you for mentioning that, because the blackboard shells will be undergoing sort of mucking around with over the next couple of days. I honestly didn't see it today, and I was assuming that all of the shells, when you registered for a number, those of you out at the hinterlands and those of you here, you registered in a different way. And so I have 2 locations of class rosters and blackboard shells. But all of your assignments are the same, and I hope that you talk to each other in between those classes, right? We're going to be with each other for a little less than 20 hours, and when the Carnegie Foundation and our grading organizations expects us to show that you've worked 150 hours for this class, we got a problem, you know? So we need to show that, you know, you're playing with this information. And what I characteristically do is look at all the assignments and value them myself according to what I think the average student at your level of education needs in terms of the time to accumulate the knowledge and to produce the results for that assignment, assignment 1, assignment 2, assignment 3. And so I hope that you talk to each other on the discussion board. There are points in the syllabus for that. So I'm glad you brought that up. The people in the registrar office are supposedly working now to put the shells together, but I am told that it may cause some difficulty in the way that that looks to you until I go back in and clean it up. So we'll stay together. That another very good question, because the course syllabus is there, and under the section called course documents, you know, I usually put a lot of stuff there and say, go read this article, or, you know, there's this idea thing there. I haven't really populated that Blackboard shell with lots of stuff yet, but periodically I will. So if you can't access it, we're kind of in trouble, you know. How many of you do have a copy or a version of the syllabus? Most people here, most people there, some people not. So if you don't have hard copy paper or electronic access to things that I talk about, you should email me pretty quick. And I have a source document or source folder on my laptop at home, and also one here where I've got all those original sources stacked. And if you don't have something and can't get to it, just email me. I'll pick it up out of the source folder and send it to you by email. Okay? I will talk about the syllabus as the evening goes on, you know, so we'll get there. Comments, questions, observations. You really can talk. You have permission to talk. I don't know whether you will or not.
Gerry.
Please don't let technology hold us back, because technology, although I'm being told that we're in this virtual land and that y'all, and I look out across both audiences, and there's enough of y'all that understand that a lot better than some of us old folks, and that virtual communication is a reality. Although this morning I had the great fortune to listen from 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock to one of the nation's leading authors and teachers and trainers of leadership, a lady named Barbara Kellerman. She's from the Harvard Center School of Leadership, and she's on a one-year a temporary appointment to Dartmouth this year. And Barbara said that she's not quite so sure that this virtual world that we live in is all that advantageous, and she's really concerned that we've kind of lost the ability to talk to each other and look each other in the face and have communication there. And it's like, well, okay, well, why don't you just go to the other room and I'll, you know, you got it, I got it. Anybody who know who Garrison Keillor is? Yeah. All right, well, my wife and I had a chance to go listen to Garrison Keillor of Prairie Home Companion in Portland, and one of his little monologue things was about this thing called communication and relationships. And he said one time that he was watching this person do their texting stuff, and they were talking about, what do you think, and is it going to be workable? And it comes back and it says, "K." And Garrison says, well, my gosh, they weren't even passionate enough and concerned enough to say, okay, you know, but it's like, got to be quick, got to be virtual, you know. So how much do we communicate with people? So technology, as I said earlier and didn't quite finish it, I think me up here as the talking head, you back there and y'all out there basically are waiting for me to present it all. You're going to listen, and we don't get as much of this. unless we were all in a big circle somewhere. That's not going to happen. You know, so let's work this issue. Please, you guys out there in what I would call the hinterlands, not being denigrating that, but you're an equal part of this MBA cohort. Let us know what you're thinking and whether you agree or disagree. You want to argue about something or question something or interact with the folks here. And you guys out there, don't just sit back there and wait for me to feed you, you know, because the way that I'm going to structure this stuff is that, and again, those of you that have been in my classes before know that I don't like to read back to you the assignments that I've given. I'm not going to insult your intelligence. So, you know, you don't have to give me a rote memory test on it, but I do want you to think about it. And the presentations that I make are going to be out there with maybe a connected idea to the night and maybe not. And it's going to be your job as a potential executive out there in an extremely chaotic and turbulent land to see if you can make sense of that so that you can use what you get in this class when you walk away from here. You know, so it's a little bit more about the structure of stuff. Syllabus later. Anytime you got questions, feel free to jump in.
Gerry?
The notes that I have to talk from are essentially coming from an extremely quick look at the articles that were assigned tonight. Now, I've already had emails from several people that say that for whatever reason or not, you've not been able to access that material, and I say, okay, that's fine. But before you turn in your first written assignment, which should be some kind of reaction to a multiplicity of things about tonight, only one of which was my esoteric craziness up here. The other is how you took that and how your fellow students were conversing about it. And the other is having read the articles that were assigned and said, oh yeah, that green world thing did make some sense. Or when he talked about this, that did. Or no, I didn't get that. And I read this and it made some. And the trouble with that is that your tendency to do master's level work, what you think may be master's level work, is to give me this complete rendition that you got all 10 points in an article. Not. Okay? Again, I've read the article, and I don't need you to spit that back to me. But I do need to know whether or not it made sense to you, whether or not you could use that information, what made you happy about it, what made you mad about it, what made you look at that article and said, that's not the way it happens at my place of business or my agency, that kind of thing. So look strongly at that. Try to make sense of that. And so when you turn that writing assignment in on Blackboard, all written, so we've got to solve our logistical problems on Blackboard so that you can get a place to turn those assignments in. So those of you that don't have the books, get them as soon as you can. Get into that material as soon as you can. And if it looks like you're going to be pushing those due dates, please holler at me. Here's a starting kind of dilemma and question for you. And you could relate this one back to organizational assessment, which if any of you have seen the syllabus, you see that at some place early on, I'm going to ask you to do a pre-evaluation of an organization that you select. Many times in those evaluations of organizations, it comes up with evaluating the behavior of individuals. How good are they? How bad are they? What kind of criteria to use to judge performance in the military? They have a lot of times these static numerical kinds of things, and you are told at that evaluator level by the people above you that if you don't give everybody 9s, you know, that you're in trouble. But if you give them a 10, you're in trouble. And I said, oh my goodness, if I gave them an 8, I just got somebody career dead end. You know, my wife and I, you know, this summer went to a thing. It doesn't make any difference what it was, but we were asked to evaluate this process. And about 4 different times during a couple of day period, we were said, if you give anybody less than a 9, they'll probably get fired. And I want to say, boy, what pressure that is. I really don't like the service I got from that, but I don't want them fired either. You know, so what is personal performance evaluation? Now, I was just talking about grading and what I want out of you and whether or not you could choose to email me and say, look, Gerry, I just can't get it in. I didn't have the book. Once upon a time at another school, I had a student that was about to take me and the School of Business to court because I was inappropriate in changing a B to an A. And it was not fair to the student who had done all the A work and the student that turned in something late that had originally got a B, and my judgment of the quality of that was, well, they didn't perform up to the expectations, right? And this other student who got the A said, you just changed that grade. You're terrible. All right, now my particular point of view on that was that if the student had the capacity intellectually and conclusive proof-wise to show me that I had misvalued their performance in accordance with the criteria that I had set, here's the results that I want you to attain. Do you know these things? Can you show me? Then I should change it because they performed at that level. Or if clearly they performed at a lesser category than what I wanted, but at a later point in our time together, they yet once again said, look, you said I didn't do this, and I want to show you how much I've learned. I know now what I didn't know then. And I'm saying, well, I got it. What's the purpose of that? What are we here for? What's the purpose of your performance evaluation? Is it to stack us up in a competitive, ranked order, or is it to look at the compliant performance of what you need to be accountable for as a unit? And I don't have the answer, but you need to look at that. You need to think about that. And early on in this quarter, I will ask you as one of the assignments to evaluate any organization that you choose according to any criteria that you choose. And before the night's over, I'm going to give you at least one set of performance criteria. Now, you may or may not like that. It's kind of an esoteric article on organizational assessment, but it's called Organizational Diagnosis, 6 Places to Look for Trouble, with or without theories, I'm not quite so sure I will at an earlier stage in this quarter share with you the mode by which I choose to assess organizations. But let me tell you this, I would offer this to you. There is a report, 2 of them actually, one that I would make accessible to you. One is a report that I actually wrote 2 or 3 summers ago at the end of a 6-week project with the Polytechnic University in Namibia, in a program where I was under the Fulbright program with the State Department, and I actually assessed and did a lot of organizational assessment work for 6 weeks and wrote a report for them. If you want that, email me and I'll send it to you. I would tell you to go to my website, but it's gone for now. My webmaster retired and trashed the archives before he told. I almost lost the domain name, but we're in the process of resurrecting my website. Any great web development people out there, call me, we'll talk. So that's not going to help you, but the report for Polytechnic University of Namibia is available. Also, what's available if you wish to look at it, and I'll email you that, is that 2 fall semester or quarters ago, I'm looking at faces out there, and some of you may have been in that class, but my organizational undergraduate class 2 years ago did a complete organizational assessment of Eastern Oregon University using this model. So it's just one more model of judging the performance of an organization. Both of those reports are available to you, and you don't have to use them, but it's a way to look at organizations. And the one that I use is a little bit more controversial, certainly, because most organizational assessment models will always use, some kind of very significant how many numbers and how much money are they making. And I'm saying that is just one so small part of whether or not an organization can do good work and is sustainable into the future. Obviously, that's a value I hold dear. But sustainability in itself is a questionable definition. I mean, even in our own division right now in the College of Business, we've got people all over our hallway looking at whether or not we're going to develop sustainability programs. And right now, where it's not particularly a debilitating argument, and it's not even an argument because we're just talking about it, but there is a diverse point of view on the part of a few faculty that something called sustainability has to do with more environmental issues, and we're not going to kill the planet. There's going to be enough resources left over, you know, when you're finished doing what you do, that we can keep doing it. You know, the example is there's an investment banker, it's out of Bellingham or somewhere, and they choose in their investment or venture capital funding, when you go to that bank for a loan, so one of the questions is that, will your business be in business 15 years from now? Whoa, wait a minute. When's the last time you heard that happen, right? And they're not even going to give you any money unless you've got a plan that shows that your business is still here 15 years from now. That's pretty tough in today's world, right? You know, what are you doing that's going to sustain itself? That's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool economic model also. But another point of view with a few of our faculty is nothing more than energy. Well, that's not even our business, you know. That's something that somebody over in the sciences department or the physics department may be dealing with, and what businesses of that of ours. But in a holistic sense, we all need to play this world together. So we're looking at this concept, but you got various points of view. How do you look at the world? What do you think is important when you think a company is good? That's all that I need to know from you for this first paper, right? You choose a company, you tell me how you're going to look at it and grade it. What sets of rules, what sets of outcomes, when you value a company as good, what are the things that you said about it? And then at the end of the quarter, I'm going to ask you to take that same organization and do that evaluation again. It may be that it's the same thing. You might not have changed a bit. For the lack of, not even the lack of, just let me just throw more things at you to keep on having you look at more things. Another way, a set of ways to look at organizations is to go to the Fortune 100 Best Companies list. You can Google that. Oregon has its own list of 100 best companies to work for. What? Why? Why do I want to work for one of those companies? You know, so go those places and see what those companies look like. Do you like the way that they grade each other, or who's grading them? I don't know. I haven't had a chance to pursue this one yet, but about a month ago, and I don't even remember where it was, but I was reading something about organizational evaluation, and there's something coming out of the United Nations that's controversial in and of itself, you know, for some people in our world. Now, keep in mind that when I say our world, most of us are business faculty, business students, which basically tells you that your overall value is that capitalist wealth creation, you know, stockholder creation, and that's not a bad thing. So you throw United Nations out there and people get kind of, it's like, wait a minute. But the United Nations has something, it's like the standard or scale for assessment of human development in organizations. Oh, what's that mean? You know, I got to make sure that I'm developing you as a human, and I'm losing money doing it, but we're developing each other. Because I like that, you know, but you may not. And if the company continues to lose money in human development, maybe I don't know. But look at some of those things. How do you grade an organization? Where do I want to go? Among tons of other things, let me give you 3 things that we're going to do in the not too temporal distant future, like minutes, not hours. One is that I still want to kind of talk about the syllabus and the assignments and see what kind of questions you have. 2 is that we're going to do a little bit more of talking to each other, and I'm going to be very, very autocratic in terms of commanding, of telling you what you have to do, which is not usually what I do, but I'll set that stage later. And then thirdly, I will go through some of my rambling notes. I do have the article that I'd like to share with you on organizational diagnosis. I may or may not get into one called The Management of Crisis and Tribulations by, because I haven't even come in contact with this man in the last 5 or 6 years, but there was a time where I was, you know, really following his work fairly seriously. And there's a guy named Bill Scott, professor emeritus now from University of Washington, brilliant person. And in many of the things that we have, moving from old to moving from new, moving from standard and stable to chaotic and turbulent, Scott sort of prefaced all that and said, you know, here's the way that some of that shifts. And one of the things that I would like to do with us tonight is share some of that with you. And we'll start off with some of the old and ask questions about what you see as potential changes from what was, if there is going to be a what is, you know, or are we still in the what was kind of thing. Does that make any sense at all to you at all? Here's the example of that in a concrete way. The what is to tomorrow, and again, repeat for lots of you, my standard sort of thing that's the most important is the movement from autocratic or centralized command decision to collective, what we used to call democratic decision making. And Barbara Kellerman this morning from Harvard used that word again. And those of you who have heard me before know that that's kind of a troublesome word nowadays, post 9/11. What is democratization? What is democracy? What's communism? Oh, no, I guess we can't talk about that in a business college. You know, what's Marxism? What's socialism? But forget all the words. Forget all the political definitions. And we go just simply from, I tell you what to do, to let's tell each other what to do. And if you look at the effectiveness of an organization, usually it revolves around how well they understand that movement. Anybody in here have fire department work or fire services background? You know, a few. You know, amazing. I mean, I know that there's an extreme differences of rural firefighting folks and urban firefighting folks, and sometimes never the twain shall meet. But if you could step back as a non-firefighter person and look at the management of those particular things and service delivery, the ones that are better are absolutely an amazing movement between I'm telling you what to do when the bell rings to tomorrow, who's going to buy groceries and whose turn it is to clean the fire department, you know? And they know. And they move back and forth effortlessly, seamlessly. And bad organizations don't. They struggle with that, you know? And if you have a bad fire department, either at the rural level, you know, or even at the urban level, you got this command structure that seems to dictate throughout and doesn't get that there's times to shift that behavior. Is it okay to do that or not? So you explore all of that sort of random movement in the management sense. So we've got 3 things to do in the not too distant future. 1 is some more of the logistics. 2 is some introductory kinds of things where I want you to talk to me a little bit. And 3, I'm going to go through some rambling stuff. Rambling stuff will come later. That leaves us with the course syllabus and logistics. Or let me just house it in the phrase of introductions. Which one do you want to do first? You want me to cover the syllabus, or do we want to talk to each other first? Where are you at? Hello, out there, questions?
Talk to each other.
Time for y'all to talk. All right, we'll do that, and then I'll cover logistics later with your questions. Let me preface this, that in a minute, I'm going to ask every single person in here to talk to us. Now, I have done this exercise in a lot of face-to-face classes, and I've done this exercise lots of times when I'm working with an intact organization to do team building, leadership kinds of interactive things. And if I say the word diversity, you know, that sometimes is okay, and sometimes people don't like it. It really raises red flags with people that say, I don't really care, it's just about getting results done. But this particular exercise, when I've done that in a face-to-face fashion, I've been able to do that structurally so that I could elicit samples of how different we all are, right? So rather than us doing that, let me just tell you about that. And then I'm going to tell you what I want you to do. And I want you to think about what each of us brings to the table in a different way. Because that's what we have to offer each other to increase our knowledge base when we walk out of here. Now, when I've done that face-to-face, I've either brought colored markers and pencils and tons of Post-it paper into the room, and I said, I want you to go up to that paper and put stuff on it. 4 pieces of stuff. 1, your name. So we have no idea who each other is here. And we've got an extremely difficult technology to get through to share that between y'all and us here. 2, you don't have concentrations and majors, so I would equate that to, let's say, career track. What are you going to do when you grow up, kind of a thing? Well, most of us are still trying to figure that out, you know. But most of us here will have some kind of career tracking. You know, what are you doing right now? Maybe that would be the way to do it. Your name, your career track, a hobby. I don't know what difference that makes or not. And then thirdly, one expectation of your time for the next year and a half of this MBA program. Okay? And I'm writing myself a note. I want to throw this out to you. Somebody please remind me to do this before the night is over. If I don't do it in the foreseeable temporal future, I want to talk to you about your thesis. You're required to do a master's thesis. I would like to talk to you about how you may structurally and get some great benefit out of planning your time towards that end production product that you have. So remind me to do that. So 1, your name. 2, your career track. 3, a hobby. And 4, one expectation. Now, the thing that I would tell you about that creates an amazing visual that shows us how diverse things are that when I do that in multiple colors, I get this sense of, and I'll share with you some things that have happened. In a class that was primarily a bunch of liberal arts students, I had flowery things all over. There was no sense of order and all that kind of stuff. And everybody had different colors, and some people didn't even write. They just drew pictures, and then they had to explain them all. In a class that I had that was primarily accountants, you know, they went up there and said, John, Jim, Sue, Ted, you know, accounting, accounting, accounting. And after the first 3 were up there, it looked just like 4 lists of things, right? And everybody almost had the same font, you know. In writing, it's like, well, which font was that? I used Areola. And it's like, okay, it's fine. But you had this sense of who they were, right? And then times, you know, somebody would choose different colors, and they wouldn't put their name up the same way, you know, or they would draw the picture of thing. And you get this sense of diversity that we all look and see and think about the world in different ways. And you won't have that opportunity because all that we're going to do here on the net is talk to each other. An amazing thing. We think about how diverse the technology is that we're dealing with, but the paradox is all that we've got is this vocal presentation of each other to see if we can sense some of that diversity. So somehow in the next minutes, you know, from now till whatever we do it, and then probably that'd be a good break point, you know, is that I would like to hear from each of us and who you are, what your career track is, what your hobby is, and an expectation out of that. So I'm Gerry Ramey. My career track is basically leadership and org behavior. I've been doing it a ton of years. I'm not expecting all this from you, but you need to get a little bit more sense of me. You heard the earlier part. Those of you that haven't heard some of the other part, my fundamental management expertise comes from the field of institutional administration. I worked in the Texas Department of Mental Health and Retardation and Institutional Administration. They don't call it that anymore, you know, but... and then I got fired from that job and then started teaching. You know, so those who teach, no, those who can't do, those who can't do, teach. And I said, oh, no, that's terrible. And those who can't teach the teachers. Oh, we're already in trouble. You know? So it's like, I'd like to think that I do this teaching thing by choice. And that job that I got fired from, whether it was political or not, obviously I was incompetent in the thing that I got fired on. And I needed to look at that. But it is fundamentally looked at, changed, and so I come to you with field of agency and public administration. I also have done a ton of consulting in for-profit entities, so that's part of what I bring to you also. My hobby is the martial arts. I've been doing that since '68. Took a little bit of 2-year break, and at the age of 58, you don't take breaks. You don't quit. And I'm really hurting right now at 60 to get back in shape. It was the stupidest thing I ever did was just to quit working out. But we're getting there. We're getting back in shape. Or I am. Expectation. I'm frustrated in the last probably 6 months with what to me seems to be a shift in my own effectiveness in a face-to-face audience versus an outreach or distance audience. For example, 2 quarters ago, one of my online classes, I had over 3,000 hits in the discussion board. I was staying up till 1 o'clock every night, and I was thinking, what is going on? And it was just amazing to watch this discussion. And then I'd get in these face-to-face classes and just break out in a cold sweat because you won't talk to me. You know, so my expectation is that I really want to work through somehow getting this involvement back in this environment too. So anyway, that's mine. Let me ask a question. What do you think the best way to do this is? For me just to start pointing to people? I got a hand that's going up. Okay, he's first. He's going to talk to us. Can y'all hear?
My name is Glenn.
Okay.
Glenn Brown. Lived in LeGrand since 1990. Came from Chicago to go to school at Eastern. And, I love this town. I came out here to be poor, and
well, that's
my major was econ and accounting, and I have a minor in political science. I hadn't been in school since, well, I graduated in '96, and I was a plant manager for a facility, a spring manufacturer. I grew up in the spring business. I was a third-generation spring maker. And I managed a small shop, about 40 people, did about $2 million a year. Did that for about 7 years. I went in, I went in as a buyer at this organization. And, but then 1990 came along, and the economy was bad, and middle management was out the door, and styles changed, and I came out here for an education, raised my kids, never went back. And, but once I graduated, I worked for a CPA here in town, and for a couple of years. And my family got sick, parents back east. So I brought my mom out here, Alzheimer's lady, and my sister, who was blind, had muscular dystrophy, who just passed away here a couple months ago. I took care of him for 12 years. Now I'm back in school, kind of a refresher. And my career track, well, I'm hoping to sit for the CPA here before the end of the MBA program. I cut firewood, that's my hobby. That and my grandchild, I have a new grandchild, so.
I like that grandparent thing.
Oh my gosh, it's a different animal completely. But
so expectation.
Expectation, well, you know, that's a good one. There were 3 areas that reason I went back to school. One is the business I was in, downsized, so I'm
how do you handle the turbulence of downsizing?
Well, yeah, underemployed. But my expectation would be, for the class itself, would be to, I want to open up an adult foster home, or several, or whatever. And I think the MBA program might give me a little bit of insight into whether or not I want to do that.
Think about that as your terminal project. And as I talk about those kinds of things as the evening progresses, track onto that.
I've always had an area of interest in investment in human capital. It's always tied together with the economic background and my desire to go into accounting. There was always that connection.
How do you value the worth of contribution of an individual, right? Exactly. If I don't say it again, email me back, but you need to write down the name Sandra Waddock, W-A-D-D-O-C-K. She's done some serious stuff on social capitalism, human capital thinking and stuff like that. Hermiston, give me a person from Hermiston and talk to us.
Go ahead.
My name's Jason Stanig. I'm a dairy controller accountant for 3 Mile Canyon Farms on the dairy side.
Wow.
Wow, that's annoying. My hobby is, I'm hearing a lot of echo, so it's a little disconcerting. Basketball, sports, it's my hobby. I love to play basketball. What I'd like to get out of this program is some help looking beyond the numbers. As an accountant, you know, preparing financial statements and such, you kind of get bogged down in only looking at the numbers, and you kind of lose sight of the larger picture. So I'm hoping to get a grasp of that.
You'll probably get sick of not looking at numbers as a result of my class. We're not going to look at too many numbers. Yeah. Have you read Sacred Hoops yet?
I have not.
If you're a basketball person, you might like it. It's a story of Michael Jordan and some of their pursuit of the championships. Marvelous book, you know. So expectation. What do you want when you walk out of here?
What do I want when I walk? What do
Out
I
of
want to
either
do?
this class or the program. Give me one thing that you've thought that you need to get out of this.
That's what I'd like to get out of this.
Yeah.
I want a broader understanding of business and not just accounting.
Holler at me when I'm not listening to you the way that you think that I should be. Say, Gerry, you just weren't listening. All right. The other side, I don't have a name that says where you guys are at, but John, where are these people at? Clackamas? Baker, Ontario? Where are y'all at?
It's Clackamas.
Clackamas. Okay, Clackamas, talk to us.
Hello?
Hi, I can hear.
Okay. Yeah, we're in Clackamas. My name is Wendy Hagee, and I'm 40 years old, and I just graduated with my bachelor's from Eastern last spring. My expectations from this class are that this class and the MBA program would enable me to grow more as a linear thinker and a global thinker, and I'd like to move forward and share my education by becoming an online instructor, undergraduate courses in business and economics. My hobby is to travel. I travel the United States at least 1 month out of every year and take one cruise every year.
Oh, that's exciting. I love the travel stuff. Good. Coming back
Pardon?
I said I love the travel stuff. Coming back to LeGrand, how about another person here? Do you want to start pointing people, or I have hands up? How do I get to this? Go ahead.
My name is CJ Green.
Can y'all hear? Okay, keep going.
My career track is either being a financial advisor or being my CPA. My hobbies, like to play sports, football, basketball, baseball, whichever it is. My expectations of the MBA program that I feel like I need to get out of it is being able to apply all the information that I do learn and have a better way of actually applying it when I actually get to the career field.
Okay. For those of you that love sports, here's the good news of tonight, and the reason that I was 5 minutes late, was that the annual College of Business and College of Education game was on with the Arts and Sciences, and we waxed them. It was good. We had a good time out there, so College of Business rules. It was fun. Okay, let's go back to Hermiston.
I'll go. I'm Annie Livingston, and I work for Blue Mountain Community College in recruiting and marketing and promotion. My career track is to kind of hang out with the college a little bit longer and see where it takes me. And I guess that's what my expectations of the program is, just to kind of build my resume up, make me a little bit more attractive, make sure that I'm available for those positions when they come up. And my hobby is agriculture. My husband and I, we're cattle ranchers, and so horses and cattle and raising kids.
All right. Shifting to Clackamas again.
Hello?
I'm here. They're here. We're here.
Yes, my name is Chris Long, and I guess the career for me would be accounting or finance. I also have interest in IT. Hobby is running. I like long distance running. And my expectations of the program, I guess, I have about 2 classes left, actually. I started in the winter term of last year, and I have this term and next term left, so I think expectations are pretty close to being over by now. But I think this program has exceeded my expectations. I think the more practical approach has worked more to my benefit. A lot of the other programs that I've taken or I guess the other colleges that I've attended have been more theoretical, and it gets kind of old after a while, because I mean, I can go and read a book, you know, that I'm interested in and absorb the information that way by myself. But so far, this program has kind of taken a different approach and made me think more practically about how I'm going to implement the degree after it's done.
It's good to know that what I told y'all at the beginning is kind of playing out from somebody that's been here a while. It's good to hear. I need another person from LeGrand. How about it?
My name is Rodell Razor. I graduated with my bachelor's from Eastern Oregon 2009, in the spring of 2009. My career track is leadership and management. I've always enjoyed it. I've felt like ever since I was young, that was kind of what I was destined to do, and whether it's with kids or it's, you know, in coaching or even in business. My hobbies, I play and coach football. I play arena football professionally, and I coach here at the university. And my expectations of this course is taking leadership skills that I feel like I have through sports and applying that to business, because I feel like with any business it's a team, and I feel, you know, that being involved in sports my entire life, trying to apply that to business will be huge. And like everyone else has said, making what we learn here applicable to using it later in life.
I'm going to play a couple more here out of the Grand area since we have more people here, and then we'll go back. So let me just keep on going this way. I'll point to folks and we'll make it easier. Yes, sir.
My name is Mark Haynes. My career track, well, I have a bachelor's degree in biochemistry.
Oh, wow.
And then got a master's in computer science. Been working in computer science for the last 20 years. My hobbies, hunting and fishing, and I'd like, my expectation is to learn things that will help me manage a company.
Right. Real quick editorial on that. We don't get very many of the sciences folks in crossover programs. And John and I were talking about one of the articles that I don't know how far I'll get tonight or in the next couple of nights, but there's a lady named Megan Wheatley who's an incredible... I lost myself. Thank you, John. He keeps me honest. Can you hear me again? Did you lose me for a while? There's a lady named Megan Wheatley who is a great management leadership person, but she has a book out, Science and Art of Leadership or something like that. And basically it's a business layperson's exploration of quantum mechanics and quantum theory as it relates to business. And there's a number of physicists, but we get people from the field of biology and chemistry that cross over, and they look at that world in an entirely different way than the typical business field. So even though you're here to get some stuff out of the business, don't be afraid to share what you know in the way that your world is framed and how that may have a major impact on how business is run too. So thank you for that. Going around, let's have another grand.
I'm Nancy Broman, and I have a Bachelor's of Science in Business Administration and Accounting from Central Washington University.
And she's one of our adjunct faculty too, by the way.
Yeah, and I do have my CPA license. So any of you out there thinking about doing your CPA license, go for it. It was the best thing that I ever did. Career track, I would like to instruct. I've had a world of experience, and I find that I really like helping and explaining, especially the computer, Microsoft Office and the operating systems, in addition to the accounting. My expectations out of this class is to fill in some of the gaps that I've had in business, and also to get sort of an understanding of what I've seen happen in some, especially small business. Because that's where I tend to concentrate in, is the smaller businesses. And you know, you talk about experience. I've had good experiences and bad experiences working for nonprofits and public accounting and in the private industry. And I have to tell you, I learned some of the major lessons that I did working for some not so nice places, how not to do things. And you talk about a team building, and we're all in this together. I can tell you major instances where, man, that is just not working. And I can tell you how it doesn't work and the reputations that those businesses get because it doesn't work.
Looking later on in the syllabus, there's a couple of articles later on called The Dark Side of Leadership. Kellerman's work, the lady that I was able to, listen to this morning, not her latest book, but one of her previous books was called Bad Leadership. She works off of some of the people. There's a clinical psychiatrist named Ketz DeVries, who I will talk about, and then also a man named Conger, who talks about the dark side of leadership. And it's basically where the people are moving the organization and the other people in ways that are not healthy for the organization. And so how do you deal with that? Where does that come from? And it's not always what you think. It's like we disagree, we agree, and that we have to deal with also. But when it's demonstrably, and I can't even say that today, that something is so demonstrably wrong. I mean, my sort of thread for the last 2 undergraduate class periods today was to talk about, right or wrong, the value that some of us place on some of the more recent events of executive behavior. And you think of them as not healthy. General Motors, the automobile, prior to that, the Enron scandals, and out of that, the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, and even 10 years before that, the Texas savings and loan scandals. However, some people would place a bad value on that, but if you go back into corporate charters and what we in the business world think about as wealth creation and stockholder wealth, none of the things that they did was truly, truly illegal. So it's like this really struggle with what's bad and what's good. And how do you define that,
I have to comment on something that you said earlier about incompetence. And I'm sorry, but incompetence to me is in the eyes of the giver. It's not necessarily...
The eyes of the giver or the eyes of the receiver?
The receiver has nothing to say about it in some instances. If somebody tells you you're incompetent, don't take that for a fact.
That's good advice.
Yeah, I mean, just take it and sit back and say, are you really, or is there something else playing there? So that's why I say...
Theoretically, given the totality of management theory, I would throw a couple of things at you. One is some work that came out of the 30s of Chester Bernard, the functions of the executive, and something that he called the acceptance theory of authority. So it's like, I may have accepted that unrightfully, but I did accept it. So it's in the eyes of the receiver and in the eyes of the giver, and you got to play that out. Let's go back to Hermiston.
All right, my name's Jason Spear.
Okay.
I graduated last year from Oregon State. I got 2 bachelor's degrees, one in business and one in education. I'm a teacher currently, and a hobby of mine, or my hobby is, I work at a golf course part-time during the summers, and I really enjoy golfing. I also enjoy spending time with my children. I have 2 young children, and planning. I like to, my bachelor's in business was in option in entrepreneurship, and so I like to think of ideas and try to think of what could make a community. I'm from Eastern Oregon and Hermiston, and I'd like to find out a great idea I'm trying to always think of for what we could use here to better the community. And then my expectation for the class is to gain more currently practiced knowledge so that I can use it for teaching my students and also hopefully for someday running a business of my own.
Also, have you read Golf in the Kingdom by Michael Murphy?
I have not.
You might like it. He got this little leprechaun over on where's the place in Scotland? That golf course.
St. Andrews?
Yeah, there's this little leprechaun that's always hitting the ball about 700 yards, right? So, where is that little guy anyway? You got to read Golf in the Kingdom by Michael Murphy. Let's come back to LeGrand. What do you got?
My name is Gerry1, and career track for me is to get my CPA license and probably go into public accounting, at least to start out with. Hobbies, I also enjoy golfing and baking. And my expectations are, I guess, primarily just to become more prepared to sit for the CPA exam.
Okay. Let's go to Clackamas. What do we have out there in Clackamas?
Hi, my name's Heather Friend. And currently I'm working as a regional service manager for one of the big banks. I've been there 12 years and love it. Career track, I plan on staying with them and hopefully one day being in another leadership role of some sorts or executive preferably. Hobbies, I find listening to everybody, I'm kind of boring. I dabble in running, I dabble in photography, neither of which I'm good at. Bargain shopping, if that counts as a hobby, is something that I am good at. My one expectation for the class is getting me to think differently. I need to see the gray, I find, in my thinking, and that life isn't always so cut and dry. And so I'm hoping to gain different perspective from this class.
Live life in the question. That is. Let's come back to LeGrand. Let's see where we're at. Have at it.
My name is Jeffrey Valley. And career track, I'd like to start a fishing guide business back home in Columbia. And hobby, I like to fish and do any kind of sport, just a lot of anything. My expectations for the class are not really sure right now, just get through it.
Hey, that's good too. Day by day, what's next? How about it next?
Paul Carollo. Not really quite sure on the career track right now. I'm currently a driver for UPS, so
that works.
See where that takes me.
It's food on the table.
That's right. Hobbies, sports. I like the outdoors. Expectations. Just to learn more than what I know now.
And hopefully we'll do something different than what I've done before in class.
I'm sure we will. Just to soak up as much information as I can and see where it takes me.
Okay. Yeah. Moving on to LeGrand, another one?
All right, my name's Caitlin Estabrook. I'm not 100% sure where my career path is going, somewhere with leadership and management, hopefully. My hobby is playing soccer, but due to injuries, I'm no longer allowed to do that. So I'm the assistant coach here for the women's team at EOU. And my expectations would just be to gain a new outlook on leadership that I can't get from another school, because it's different here, and I like it.
I think we are different. We're a bunch of radical folks over there in the college of business, right? Going back to Hermiston. More people there.
Hello.
Howdy.
My name is Sarah Kamau. I'm from Kenya, which is in Eastern Africa. I have been working as a project manager in the area of education, and that's a career path that I would like to follow. And my hobby is mostly on outdoor activities, and currently I'm developing a hobby in horse riding. And my expectations for this class is to be able to develop my worldview, especially in the area of leadership and management.
Thank you. I'm going to, after everything is done, I've got some comments that I'll make, but periodically, obviously, I'm interjecting. A minute ago, somebody said something about linear and global. We have another commentary on the global thing. I'm not quite sure that both of those fit together. You know, and so I applaud whoever said that, but the challenge will be that it possibly is that global perspective is not particularly linear, you know, in terms of it's 1, 2, 3, because the minute that you expand your exposure or your travel, I mean, for me, even I wouldn't say Vietnam was exactly a chosen travel where I was becoming globally aware. It was like, this is one thing that's going on. But when I went to Romania, it was like, oh my goodness, this world is a different place. And although I'd been going to Romania, my wife and I, off and on since '99, even last year when we went to Namibia, or the summer of 2008, once again, just an absolutely unbelievably life-changing experience. And so the exposure, and I welcome you in the program. Hopefully you will talk to us and we will talk to you. And it's just mind-boggling to think about that kind of stuff. And whether you believe in this concept of globalization or not, we are all one planet. And it's just an amazing phenomenon out there. You know, so great, great. I would interject here, one of my things about the global factor is that when I went to Romania on a Fulbright scholarship to teach, I was the one that was funded by the State Department on a Fulbright scholarship. But my wife went with me, and my wife is a Celtic harper, amongst other kinds of things. And she played for this little gig that we had with some people. And one of the persons that was there was the Cultural Affairs Ambassador for the United States to Romania. And Kiki ended up putting my wife and another young woman in Romania on a 5-city tour paid for by the embassy. But I was the one that was supposed to be teaching. But the music was just unbelievably drawing. And today my wife is a member of a Zimbabwean marimba band, and I call it Tendai and the Funky White Women because it's all a bunch of white American women in Tendai from Zimbabwe. And they get invited to the Zimbabwe Festival every year, and it's just an amazing, and the women, the music that they produce, he fuses this cultural African music with my wife, a Celtic harper, a lady that plays the flute, a lady that plays the trumpet and the flugelhorn. Now, I'll tell you about this lady. She was beat almost to death by her husband, broke her jaw, and they said, you're never going to play the trumpet again. And she's an accountant for D.A. Davidson, but she's playing the trumpet again. This lady played in a warm-up band for Jimi Hendrix. She was in the warm-up band that toured with Moody Blues 2 years in a row. And she just makes you cry when she plays the trumpet. But it's the trumpet and the flute and the harp. And then Tendai brings all this stuff together to create this fusion of global music that just makes you want to cry. You know, and it's like, I mean, what's that got to do with management? I don't know, but it's a beauty of the world. And that when you do get out there and interact with folks in other walks of life, you see that, you know, that stuff is important in organization. And actually, that's what Barbara Kellerman said this morning from Harvard. She said, you know, we business folk, we have assets equals liabilities plus owner's equities and 14 financial ratios and 6 ways of, okay, it's price, product, promotion, placement, and planning, organizing, controlling, and directing, and nothing else matters. And she said, yes, it does. Art and music and literature, and you learn a lot from all that stuff. Okay, let's go back to Clackamas and pick up another one there.
Hi, my name is Yufei Zhao. I'm from China. I'm an international student right now. And I had my bachelor's degree in Florida from International University. And after that, I have worked in a resort for 2.5 years. And my career track actually is either international business or human resources, because I had half year in human resource working experience. It's not long, but I kind of like it. And my expectation from this class or this program is going to be, I hope it's going to help me to ready for the international business field or the human resource, which I like. And my hobby is painting and ceramics.
All right, let's see. We're coming back to LeGrand. Pick up a couple more here.
My name is Cameron Starner, and for a career track, eventually want to open up my own homebrew supply store. Yeah. Obviously, the economy is not good for that, so pumping the brakes, and that kind of goes into the expectations of this class.
Limited market.
Yeah.
Yeah, but homebrew is good stuff.
Oh, yeah,
My son and I just started a cherry chocolate porter in Portland. He's bringing me some this weekend.
Really?
Yeah. All right. Go on.
And expectations for this class, really just kind of, like Paul said, gain as much knowledge as I can and hopefully apply it. Between now, or I guess graduation from this program, and then starting my own business would be to just get a job somewhere in low to middle management and gain as much experience as I can.
Yeah.
So, and then my hobby is long distance running.
Yeah. My wife has turned into a running freak. You know.
You should tell her to quit.
Yeah, I know. She's in pain right now because she went from walking the marathon thing, and my daughter convinced her to start running, and she walked the Seattle Marathon this summer, and they convinced me to walk with them. The rest of my family is seriously into this stuff, and I was like, yeah, I'm too lazy, forget it. But they found this half marathon in Portland called the Fueled by Fine Wine half marathon. And I did it. They said they'd do it. I would do it. It would just take the right reward, you know, to do it. And so then Marcia walked that one. And then in between that time, my daughter convinced her to start running. So in a 3-week period of time, she went from being a walker to a runner, and my daughter and her did the Sturgis run with all the Harley guys. But it was an all-women's, it's called Leading Ladies Marathon in Blackfish or Spearfish, and she ran it. And then she ran a 4, 6, 10, 10 week, the week after she did the half marathon, and now she's got these little things that are going on. I said, Marcia, you need to go to the gym and hire a trainer and get some of this stuff worked out. But she's so frustrated because she wants to keep on doing it, but she's got this stuff to work through.
There's a 15K in Portland called the Shamrock Run, and the winner, the male and female winner of each race, wins their weight in beer.
Whoa! I'm going to have to check this one out. We're signed up for the holiday. That's a good reward. We're signed up for the holiday half in Portland, you know, this Christmas. So, yeah, it's fun. It's kind of, you know, I was supposed to do 4 today, but I didn't. So I think tomorrow I'll do 6. So anyway, one more in LeGrand, then we'll shift back here. Go ahead.
All right. My name is Grace DeBute, and I am currently the assistant coach for the women's volleyball team here on campus. My career field, I'm not really sure. I currently work out at the Ag Experiment Station in Union, and I like it, but it's not full-time, so I'm going to have to find something different. My hobby is basically playing sports and outdoors type of stuff. And expectations would be just taking the knowledge I gained from this and using it towards a possible career field whenever
Putting food in your mouth, right?
What?
Putting food in your mouth, getting
Yeah.
a job. Right. Let's come back to Hermiston. We have a few more there, 1 or 2 more someplace. Somebody that hadn't shared yet?
My name is Misty Eisel, and I work at the Umatilla Chemical Depot. And my career is obviously accounting because I have a bachelor's in accounting from Eastern and a minor in history. I also work seasonally for H&R Block. My hobbies are gambling, drinking, internet, music. Have to be honest, I love the wild horse. What I want out of this is to be able to move up in management when the depot closes. I'd like to transfer the company. And that's about all.
Okay. Do we have more people? Anybody else in Hermiston that hadn't?
Yeah. Yes, we have one more.
Okay, let's bring it on.
Hi, my name is Steve Olson. I'm up front and can't see me. I'm in the. I have been a student since last year. I've taken the long track because I've got long hours during the day, and I'm kind of scared to come back to school. I got my bachelor's in 1994 from North Dakota State University, and my expectations from this course and this whole program is to gain a better business background. Having a degree in agriculture and animal science didn't give me a very strong basis at all. I took some basic courses in my college, but I didn't have a strong enough business background, and it's cost me some chances at promotions in my career field, and I'm kind of hoping that'll give me a little bit of a step ahead to get a better chance at a better job within my company perhaps, or within the agricultural field somewhere. And my hobbies are basically I like to fish and hunt, but I've been working 7 days a week lately, so I haven't had a chance to do much of that. And that's about it, I guess.
Okay. Back to Clackamas. Anybody left in Clackamas, or did we get everybody there yet? Okay. Everybody's coming back to LeGrand. Let's go this way on the, I don't know you, so.
My name is Celeste Lopez. My career path would hopefully take me to be a psychologist. My hobby is running, and my expectations are to learn and apply them to the real world.
What is the real world? I have trouble with this because we say, when you get out there in the real world, I said, this is not real, you know. But I hear what you're saying, and we do that all the time. It's like, well, when we get out into the real world, it's like.
I read books, but I don't take what I learn out. It just stays one class at a time.
That's maybe me too. My family says that I'm so buried into my Kindle that I won't even lift my face sometimes, you know. So coming back, moving across the back line there.
My name is Jay Webb. I'm from Texas. So.
Oh, I feel sorry for you.
Hey,
I moved up from Texas in 1980, but I haven't been back since.
I lived in Austin most of my life. I spent the last 8 years at Abilene Christian University, a stone's throw from UNT.
I graduated from Abilene High School.
Did you really?
1968.
Well, what do you know?
Went to Hardin-Simmons for 2 years and flunked out of religious education.
Fantastic.
Said, oh, God's telling me something, you know.
I have a bachelor's in youth and family ministry, a master's in education. I've done some PhD work. I'm working on that in organizational leadership.
All right.
So I got an administrative faculty position up here this spring. I'm the area coordinator for housing and student involvement, so I run the residence halls on campus.
We'll have to share some Abilene stories later.
All right, that'd be great.
The Mecca of 3 religions.
That's right.
Church of Christ, Methodist, and the Baptist. There's 3 universities there, but they say that you can pick one of your sins and get whatever you want, just whichever school you go to.
Small world, small world.
Yeah.
My hobbies are disc golf, music. I love to listen to music, play music. I sing some. I'm really bad at miniature golf, and I like to ride motorcycles. I have a 1150 Honda Shadow that I enjoy taking out as often as I can. Expectations. I think I enjoy learning, and so I want to expand my knowledge base and my skill set. And where are you going to go that an MBA is going to hurt you? So it's kind of good to have one in your back pocket. But career track, I don't know, I've been working in higher education for 5 years now, and I really enjoy the environment. So.
Yeah. Dr. Clements and I have this thing about maybe we need to put a little bit of advertising on the web page, and that he and I should probably get us a golf cart and get our Scottish knickers on and have them take pictures of us playing disc golf on campus in a golf cart. That'd make a great picture, you know. Moving.
I'm Wade Foster. I actually work down in Congressman Walton's district office here.
Okay.
And this was available and convenient, so I'm doing the MBA track. I got done at Oregon State University a year and a little bit ago in environmental economics and policy.
Oh, wow.
Hobbies are running and wine and trying to get out of the office. And hopefully, I don't have much business experience, so especially working for the congressman, it feels like this would be a very applicable class to apply.
Now, have you been to Bella's yet? Dr. Mueller tells me that Bella has some really great wines. He brought a $7 bottle of wine to our party last night. It was like, whoa, this is really good.
Yeah, they've got great wine.
Definitely affordable drinking.
Yes.
All right. We're finding out everybody's vices here, you know. It's like really interesting. Good wine, good beer, you know, it all works. We're moving along the back row here.
My name is Ashley Munn. I graduated with my degree in ag business, and now I'm the district coordinator for the Monument Soil and Water Conservation District. My hobby, I like to cook. It's kind of fun. And
it is.
My expectation is to hopefully figure out what I'd like to do when I grow up. So maybe I'll get that figured out.
Yeah. Still working on it, you know. And
I'm Emma Winkleman. I just graduated this last spring with a degree in accounting and a minor in ag business. And I'm currently the accounting manager at EONI here in town. And further on in my career track, I want to become a CPA, I think, maybe.
Okay.
And my hobbies are shopping and spending time with my animals. I have dogs and horses. And the expectation for this program, I think, for me is I'm from a really small town and I've only worked for small private companies. So I kind of want to gain some knowledge about the big corporate field.
who are those guys anyway? Anybody see the movie Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid? Oh, it's great. You know, it's like, you know, Robert Redford says, who are those guys anyway? You know, those people up there, you know, I don't know. Okay, just a couple of 3 editorials. Some of it I won't go into in length, and then we'll take a little break. One is that as you started talking about some of your career tracking and the jobs that you were in, there's a man named Hall who has written, he's one of those theory people, but I was exposed to him in my master's programs. Hall has this thing that he calls boundary spanners, right? People in organization that move across the boundaries, whatever the boundary is. If the boundary is a hierarchical boundary, somebody that's in middle management, or the boundary around the organization that moves outside, like a board of directors, or maybe a purchasing agent, crosses the boundary. Anybody that crosses a boundary is in an extremely paradoxical position. You're really weak at one hand because you're at the will of anybody that's on either side. But on the other hand, you've got the potential for really influencing stuff inside of the organization. But it's a scary place to be. So it's, but if you're wanting to play in that world, look at targeting jobs that are boundary spanners, right? Either inside an organization or moving from the public to the private sector and things like that. In Romania, well, not just in Romania, but much of Europe, they have this thing called NGO. Now, if you've been in the public sector here, you kind of know a little bit about that, but it's this odd beast, non-governmental organization. Well, does that mean that it's a for-profit entity? No, but government is not profit. Okay, wait a minute, I'm confused. Non-government, so if it's not government, it must be for-profit. No, and this thing in European non-governmental organization is this unbelievably complicated monster of public entities, private entities, and agencies that are moving back and forth. You know, and you think about the break of the wall in 1989, many of those countries are coming out of communist-run organizations. Is that good or bad? I don't know. Communism defined is almost the same thing as democracy defined, but you've got privatization going on. Oh, well, so at what point do the contracts move from public to private, and does that work or not? So there's that kind of thing going on. The field of psychology, and you can either email me back and forth on this, and I can talk to folks individually. I don't want to waste, and it's not a waste of time by any means, but when only one or two people or three or four talk about something, I'd rather engage in personal conversations with you. But my own field is what I would call organizational psychology. That's where I focus, although I'm not a licensed psychologist. I spent 3 years in the counseling and psychology program at University of Idaho, and I'm 5 hours away from a specialist certification. I've got enough hours to sit for federal and state counseling examinations, but it's something I choose not to do. But my focus is organizational psychology rather than individual psychology. But I'm familiar with that territory a little bit, and the licensing of and the kind of education that you would need to pursue to engage in that, either as an independent person or as somebody working with agencies. The other thing that I heard mentioned a great deal, at least enough to hit me in my mind, was the choice that some of you were talking about teaching. Now, we can either engage in that in a class here, or feel free, and maybe I could even set up a time where, you know, the 5 or 6 of you that dealt with that, we could talk, or feel free to call me individually. My undergraduate degree was from North Texas State University with business and English with lifetime certification to teach in high school, right? And I chose not to do that because that's a field that's extremely control-oriented, and I go ballistic, you know, on that. I'm this raging radical anarchist, and I don't like people telling me what to do, you know, so it didn't work for me to teach in high school. But to teach in junior college, or to teach in a small college at the community level, or what is it that you want to do? You know, do you think about moving on and teaching or working in the academic level at that other level of the Tier 1 schools, which means an entirely different thing? My personal thing is that you have made a wonderful choice to get those first pieces of paper here because of the foundation training that you can get. But depending on your choice as to whether or not you're going to teach at the junior college level with what kind of certification, master's degrees, usually to teach at a full-blown status at the university and college level, immaterial of whether it's a Tier 1 or Tier 2 school, you know, you probably need to think about doctorate level work. Where do you do that? You know, I got my own doctorate degree from a non-traditional school, which is an absolutely thing not to do if you are thinking about teaching at a name brand school. Don't do what I did, do what I say. I went backwards in terms of where I got my degrees. I got my least degree from the best school, from North Texas State University, which at the time was one of the top 25 business schools in the nation. I got my master's degree from University of Texas down in the South Texas branch campuses. Now, if I had done it in Austin, it might have been a different thing. But getting your degree from branch campuses in that big boy world of the Harvards and the Whartons is not the thing to do. But it was a marvelous opportunity. I was teaching at a junior college, and they had a program in Harlingen, Texas. I took a couple of classes in Edinburgh, which was the big campus. But in Harlingen and down in Brownsville on the tip of Texas, about 3/4 of the student body were offshore oil and other kinds of company executives that have been moved from the eastern regions of America to run the companies in South Texas. And I'm thinking, this is absolutely great. What better experience that I could do to sit in a classroom full of already executives that are running offshore companies all over South Texas. But I learned a lot of practical application, but I didn't get it from a name brand school. And then, because of not wanting to give up a $14,000 cut in pay to get a doctorate degree from Washington State University, and I had 2 kids, and I was teaching at a little community college called Lewis Clark State College, I said, I got to have a doctorate. They're going to fire me if I don't get one. I got my doctorate degree from a completely non-traditional school. So I went, you know, but it's what they said. It's what EOU says. We make this statement that we're making a commitment to multimodality teaching, and that's the way I got my doctorate. You know, but to teach at Harvard, to teach at Wharton, I'll never make it. But to teach at a small school, it's okay. So there's lots of choices to make, and many of you have talked about your athletic background, and that's yet another entree into the junior college modality. You know, in that if you teach at the high school level, you're going to talk about getting another 60 to 80 hours worth of methods of teaching classes. But teaching at the junior college level doesn't necessarily take that. So it's some choices that you have, and I can talk to you a lot more about that as time goes on. One more comment, and I'll probably talk about this as the days progress. We'll talk maybe a little bit about more tonight, because specifically some of our administrative folks that are helping us to look at curriculum in the MBA program has said we want to make sure that we cover this as fields of study and as ways of looking at this material. One is that concept of environmental concerns and sustainability, and the other is the issue of human resource management and how that plays out. And a couple, 3 of you mentioned that. It's kind of a minefield in a way. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, you know, as time goes on. It is now 7:45. How about if we take a break, come back in about 10 minutes or so, and then we'll gear up again. Fair enough? Thank you. Marvelously diverse group of people. you have a good season? Yeah, you. Good. And you? Oh, are you? Where are you? Wow. Bad ref calls, or just the way it was, or? You gonna play again next year, next season, same team? Or? Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, well, evidently you've got some hesitation about that. But did you enjoy it? You put food on the table, you ate? Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah, 1968, you know. Uh-huh. Yeah, it's probably weren't thinking too much about who you were at that day. Yeah. Then I was seriously into the church movement, having grown up in the community at that point, and even and the Marines didn't seem to change that a great deal, I say, but obviously they did, you know, in terms of my life movement and stuff. But I came back and I went to Hardin Simmons and I was a religious education major until I flunked out. And then I said, okay, I'm going to go make money. When was the last time you were back? You know, I periodically went back to Abilene. My parents lived there for quite some time, you know, and they're now in San Antonio. And my wife's parents and her family is around Sweetwater.
Oh, great.
So
like next to the woods.
That's stomping grounds. But we moved here in 1980, and I was still with my boots and blue jeans back in those days, you know, and I was born a Texan, always a Texan, you know, but
I'm finding it hard to adjust.
But we fell in love with the Northwest. I couldn't be without the trees. I couldn't be without the mountains. It's just,
my wife's from Seattle, so that's part of the reason why we're back up here.
So, okay.
She actually went down there to go to ACU,
Yeah.
and we met there.
Well, there's Abilene Christian College way back then.
Yeah, 72 it changed. So.
Right.
Yeah. But
ACU. My dad was at one time it's probably defunct organization now, but it was Abilene State School for the Retarded at that point.
Abilene, it's still there.
It's something different, right?
Yeah.
But he was the physical education director there, and many of the people that worked their way through the social services and the physical education programs were ACU students.
Yeah.
A lot of the athletes that came to him, and he had several guys that ended up playing pro ball,
yeah.
you know, that were actually ACU students.
Yeah, that's
you know, so,
higher education. When I watched turn on the Bears, there's two of my residents right there.
Yeah.
A little weird.
Yeah, so Abilene Christian University, yeah. It's amazing.
Hard to find somebody who knows what Abilene is, let alone.
Well, because they got that Christian bubble over it, you know.
That's right.
It's hard to sort of infiltrate the meccas.
Well, and moving from Austin.
Oh. And moving from liberal to conservative.
Yeah, very much so.
If there is a liberal element of Texas, it's got to be Austin. Right. You know. Yeah. The culture shock. Culture shock. Yeah. All West Texas. Yeah. It's amazing. Small world. Small world. Okay, folks, we're back at it. It's 8 o'clock. We've got a couple of hours, give or take, or a few minutes less therein, or some of you may just get tired and walk out while I'm still talking, you know, but you're paying for the full meal deal. We'll see what we can do to get you that far tonight. Let me talk about your papers a little bit. just not for my class, for your thesis. Because I'd like to just kind of throw some things at you to think about as you, tonight, tomorrow, begin to think about what your end result. If you stay with the program, stay in the program, you will be required to do a thesis. Let me give you an example of two of them. And I don't know where you want to go in terms of playing this academic game. This is another piece that I think is absolutely wonderful about EOU that you won't find many other places, is that faculty member here are willing to share a writing agenda with our undergraduate and graduate students. Okay, one of my prior students at Lewis Clark State College jumped in the middle of a paper that myself and another faculty were writing, and ordinarily what happens at this academic ivory tower left is that faculty abuse the hell out of students and having you do all of our work, and we put our name on things. And Katie, who was one of those students who was tenacious enough to keep on telling Bill Gates, I want to work for Microsoft, I want to work for Microsoft. And you don't go to work for Microsoft coming out of a little four-year college in Idaho, and Katie did. Katie jumped in the middle of an article that Nancy and I and other faculty were working on and completely twisted our heads, and so it ended up that we've got this article accepted as a paper at the Western Academy of Management. We got Katie to go with us, and she presented it, And right now, we are working with 3 different groups. Dr. Clements and Professor Day and I are working with one of our undergraduate students on a paper that we're going to try to get it published in an international journal at the undergraduate level. Dr. Clements and I are working with one of last year's graduate students on a paper that she started that we're trying to get published. And then I'm working with Dr. Carpenter with another one of last year's graduate students on another paper. So I don't know where you want to go with these things. But some of the faculty over there, if you choose to have them be your mentor or your faculty that advises you, whatever your content area is, go find them and say, hey, mentor me, or you be the one that grades me and all that. And in many cases, it might be that if that's something that interests you and intrigues you. Now, having said that, what I would say is that whatever the area is, be thinking about the product that you would like to produce at the end, a year from now, 2 years from now, depending on what program. And every single class you take, you think about that paper. And if you have a chance to produce an end product for that class, make it relevant to your product. And then you've got 6 little partial papers or 4 little partial papers that feed the end one. You're just doing more and more work that makes you think more and more about the totality of your end result product. Does that make sense? Instead of just saying, I'm going to do a paper for that class, I'm going to do a paper for that class. One of the things that many colleges and universities do, and most schools of business, is what I call multidisciplinary thinking. Okay? You'll take accounting classes and marketing classes and economics classes, and never the twain shall meet. When you're through with economics, it's like price, product. Let's see, when the price goes up, the demand goes what? When the demand, anyway. The propensity of, and then when you're through with that, you're done. Instead of realizing that, well, if the market's changing and there's an increase in market demand out there, that somebody better go over there and talk to the accounting people to see if there's enough money, and somebody better go over there and talk to the management and the manufacturing and the production people to see if those machines still have shelf life left on them, or if they're going to burn out because somebody told you that there's a 20% economic increase in the market. But we teach in these little silos, right? But the world doesn't operate in silos. It all gets mucky out there, right? And so multidisciplinary, integrated, interdisciplinary thinking is the way that it ought to be. So my thoughts are that instead of doing a paper for this class and a paper for this class, and it's done, think about what you want at the end to do your overall research or product or whatever it is that you're going to do, and make every class that you take relevant to something that's a bigger picture for you. You do the linking, right? Does that make sense? And besides that, when you do it that way, you've got little pieces that make the end result a lot easier. You know, so it's something to think about, you know. Okay. Yes, sir.
Are the theses that other students have written, graduated, are they available to?
They should be. They're a matter of public document. They have to be turned in. And actually, that's a great question. This accrediting organization that I'm talking about, we have a meeting with our, quote, assessment team. How do we evaluate ourselves, you know, on Friday morning? And one of the things that we're looking at for the master's program as is a major way of us determining whether or not the effectiveness of what we do is working is to look at these end products. You know, were you communicating well? Did you write well? Did you think across the curriculum well? Were you able to present, you know, information well? And your thesis is that, right? And so part of this process is that those are available to the public market. And I don't know if there's this magic room over there in Zabel that has them all, but you might call Lori Baird, you might call Dr. Mueller, see kind of what you can find out about that. You know, there's a struggle with that when students choose to do those projects about real organizations in terms of the confidentiality. Now, as a consultant, you know, I make a client list available, but I don't make anything that I do with that client available. Now, not being a licensed psychologist, some people would disagree with that because I can't hold forth confidentiality of that. But you think that my clients, if I've been dealing with profit and loss stuff, want that information of public? No. But if it's in an academic sense and we've taken the names out and you've written generically, for example, one of the projects that we're working on as we go forward in terms of public presentation, we will probably unlist the name of the organization and say Public Service Agency XYZ does these things, right? But nonetheless, what is really happening should be available to you. And so, but you got to put some feet on the ground and do some exploration about that. I don't know where the files exist. But that, yeah. So, other questions? You know, coming back at what we just said, I just to reiterate the diversity, it was great listening. That's the first time I've ever done that much introducing of each other in this MBA class. You know, this is the third or fourth one. Well, maybe the fifth one. I don't know, a few. And I've never spent the time to do that, but I really liked listening to all of y'all. And what I think about that is that if y'all bring that back out as we talk to each other, either on the net, you know, when you think about your own backgrounds that you're bringing to the table now, what a wealth of knowledge each of y'all have to bring to each other, you know. And that's the disadvantage of you turning in papers at the end of the quarter, because my knowledge base increases exponentially. What I would like to happen is that those things that you know about the way the world works, when you're reading these articles and stuff, share that stuff with each other. We all walk away better. You know, Sengi's work on the learning organization is, although he's not one of my favorite authors, he's kind of one of those rah-rah speakers, you know, but there is some truth to know that, you know, organizations that learn from each other. And it's not just this person up at the top is the consummate expert, you know. Not many of us work for Bill Gates. Not many of us work for Trump. Not many of us work for Jobs. Most of us work in organizations that are much different than that. But collectively, as those of you that are coming to us from the sport world know, it's that ethos of the ability to. One of the student athletes this morning said that one of the things that she knew let her identify a good organization was the respect that each individual had for each other, no matter where they were in the system, that we respect each other's contribution to the whole behavior, So my son, which I will talk about frequently, is continuing to go through life changes, and some bad, some good. He got fired from a tax firm in Boise, and his business card said wealth creator, and I would tell you the names of the clients that his firm had, but it probably wouldn't be a nice thing to do. But you had to have $5 million to walk in the door. And he said, it's really interesting that I'm supposed to, like I said, his business card says wealth creation on it. And he was just not a heavy hitter like that. He said, I'm supposed to be saving $1,000 a day for these people, and some people can't even eat. And I would like to use my law degree and my tax master's, from Florida to help people. So when he got fired, he, for 6 months, was the policy analyst coordinator for Oregon's retirement system. He worked for PERS in Portland for 6 months, and he was happy. He took a serious salary cut to do it, but he had benefits, and he was working for this agency thing. Interesting part of that story is that when he got fired, one of the clients that went back and forth between Boise and Spokane was a shared client with another organization, the organization that he's now working for, called Washington Trust Bank. The boss that fired him called one of the VPs in Spokane and said, I just want you to know that Bill Ramey is not working for us anymore, because he had to. There was a disclosure factor that they were working with the shared client. And my son was sort of the interface between the two organizations. And then he turned right around and said, but if you have a place to hire him, it's like, wait a minute, why would I want to hire somebody that you just fired? But he said, go hire him. So this goes on for quite some time, and he's calling me and said, what am I going to do, Dad? It's like, and they had to take a short sale on a house that they had just bought in Boise, which was just crazy. The banks didn't lose any money because FHA bailed them out, but they got a terrible credit rating and lost it all. He worked for Oregon for 6 months, and a couple of months ago, Washington Trust started calling him. Did you want to work for us? He said, no, I'm sorry, it's a little bit too late. I'm happy. He said, well, would you just talk to us? So they talked to him, and he went around and around, and they ended up hiring him in Portland, and he was nervous about it. And I said, that's pretty interesting to me. Those guys know the worst about you. They know that you were fired, and they know under what conditions happened, and they're still recruiting you, So he is now an associate vice president for Washington Trust Bank as a trust officer out of the Portland office, recruited. And he says, what better way to be recruited when you have a job? Most people are looking for jobs when you don't have jobs, But it's about who you are and what you do and what your passions are and where you fit. And you think about looking for those jobs, never underestimate yourself, your own head and your own heart. And don't give up. Just keep on looking. I know it's easy to say, keep the day job, right? Never give up that day job. But you're in these programs and these positions, and I hear you saying you're here just kind of killing time, waiting on things, and some of you are not killing time. You're in active explorations. But the other part of that is that you are the future. I don't care what your ages are. You think about the place that you are at in life, and you're the future of those agencies and those corporations that are in our region and maybe not even in our region. So I would say we can't give up the dreams and the hopes of making every one of those places better for other people and better for you. Because if you don't make it better for you, at what point in time do you get bled to death and there's nothing left of you to give away to somebody else? And that's one of the pieces of leadership research that we know that, well, you might think that that is a selfish piece of leadership, is to take care of yourself. It's not. It's a matter of learning and growing and continuing to amass the information that you need to help you be better at what you do, which consequently, as in James McGregor Burns' terms, transformational leadership, to rise the level of everybody's performance, you and others, to a higher level. And that's transformational leadership. And that's one of the things that whether I think that it's legal or not, the stuff that's been happening in the let's call it high executive compensation world, the things that are happening out there, I wonder sometimes if those folks are really acting in the best interest of the total constituents that they're working for. Stockholder phenomena aside, there's people that are being damaged in some of those actions. And I got to question some of those legally, and from a capitalistic point of view, I can't question that, you know, but otherwise I do. Live in that question. I want to talk about these articles for a few minutes. So I'm going to take them one at a time and just throw a couple of things at you. I don't know how much of them you've read or not. If you've read them, the things that I say may make sense to you, and then they said, which article did he read? I read this other one, and he's talking about something entirely different. So as you get those books and have a chance to read them before you turn in your first assignments, think about the connections and disconnections that I threw at you. Okay? The first one was Article 1B3. And if you have some trouble in terms of my delineation of what assignments to make, feel free that you email me and say, Gerry, I don't understand. What page number do you want me to read? So if you don't understand the assignments and what they are, please email me or call me and say, I need to know. Although if you call the EOU number, that's a hard one to get me at. I'll see that blinking thing there about every 2 or 3 days. But if you email me there, as my family says, I'm buried to the computer, you know, or the Kindle. So if I'll move back and forth between one and the other, I'll respond to emails within half a day. So if you need me, email me, okay? So the first one was science or art. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I will throw some names at you that if you have a business undergraduate background, these names should not be like foreign to you. But I can't say that. I mean, for example, I heard some of you talk about your undergraduate degrees from EOU versus OSU versus Florida versus other places. Even if every one of you had your degree from EOU, not every one of you took Management 321 from me. You know, so I don't know if these things are familiar to you or not. However, let's talk about scientific management for a moment. That has its sort of background and underpinnings from what they call the Scientific School of Management, coming out of the late 1800s, early 1900s. People like Fred Taylor, which of the Ford Company fame, you know, he actually interjected a lot of scientific management theory into Ford. And Ford, as he did the industrial lines, production facilities and things like that. But Fred Taylor did some scientific studies, and also there was a pig iron shovel study that he did. I don't remember what it was. But he was considered the father of scientific management. There's a right way, there's a best way. It's very autocratically oriented. It's very 1, 2, 3 oriented. There's no questions about all that. Then there's another name that's out there, Henri Fayol, which was the French industrialist, coming out of an age where owners were owners and they were landed gentry, had lots of money. Sometimes they had knowledge about how to manage businesses. Sometimes they didn't, but they owned them, so nobody was questioning them. And so the competency of managing what was moving into away from the agricultural phenomena into what senior moments here, the Toffler's work, agricultural age, industrial age, information age, as we moved into that industrial phenomena, you know, where there was a way of looking at things and science of, oh, the factory line kind of works this way, and there's this sequencing of that. And we're coming out of a state of chaos where nobody really knew anything about that. And so Henri Fayol gave us the functions of management, planning, organizing, controlling, directing. You know, he also gave us several, you know, statements. There were about 14 various principles of that, late 1800s, early 1900s. He stabilized the chaos. You know, Fred Taylor, the science guy, did. You know, Max Weber, the German bureaucratic guy, although most of us look at bureaucracy today and say inefficiency, red tape, we hate it. But you have to consider that in a historical context, coming out of chaos, coming out of not even meritocratic kind of governance and reward systems, but who gets it, who has the money, and that's not what we're doing today. Who gets to control things. There's one for you. The IMF, the World Bank, and the World Trade Organization, who controls them today? The member nations. Think about this concept of haves and have-nots. Oh yeah, but I thought that World Bank and World Trade Organization and the IMF were about economic distribution for a better planet. Yeah, well, okay, you need to go read the charters of those organizations in the late 40s. And what do they say about the way they're supposed to behave versus the way that they're behaving today? The haves and the have-nots. Okay, but I just told you that that's the way that things were in the 1800s. The people that owned it, that had the wealth, they did it. Not always well, right? And the School of Scientific Management Thinking, for those of you that had some kind of historical thought processes foisted upon you in your first management class, will recall those people. And they stabilized previously chaotic managerial environments. That's the Scientific School of Management. One of the secretaries of state that we've had, Reich, was a great theorist in the separation of things like top managers do this, middle managers do this, bottom managers do this. Another name that I would throw out at you for that in terms of a management theorist was Henry Mintzberg, M-I-T-N-Z-B-E-R-G. And now if those of you that, as I'm throwing names out to you, if they intrigue you and I haven't got them, email me and say, Gerry, you said so-and-so. Who was that again? Actually, while not the substance of work that you could do for this class, I periodically ask students to help me put that back together in a bibliography list, and that exists in various places of names that I've thrown out to students over the years. Henry Mintzberg talked about top-level middle management and bottom-level management and separated that function and said top managers plan and direct, middle managers coordinate and liaison and communicate, and bottom managers implement, and never the twain shall meet. And then you look at organizations in the end of the day and you say, oh my goodness, that's not the way it works. It's all messed up. So does that mean that they're wrong? Well, according to that set of theories, the Scientific School of Management, they are wrong. But today is chaotic and turbulent. All right, so I'm going to move it to the art stage. So now you want to go read people like Peter Vail, who used to be out of some place called George Washington University, V-A-I-L-L. He is now out of Antioch, and Peter Vail has a book called Whitewater Management, The Art of Management. And he says, where's the passion for dealing with things? And it's not that they've got 6 ways of doing things, and here's the fundamental 6 rules, or 14 financial ratios, but it's a matter of, hey, you know what you're doing or you don't. I often use an example of a friend of mine as we were getting our MBAs at University of Texas Pan American. And I said, I got to have it because I'm a total ignorant fool about this stuff. I don't know. I'm not the artist that you are, Al, and I need probably to be more of a scientist because I need to know what these theories are about how I'm managing these complex sets of events, right? Now, Al Barreda, my friend, was the director of financial aid at a junior college that ran, now you can imagine, it gets more complicated as the days go on, but even at that time, 30 some odd years ago in the late 70s, if you think about 75, 85% of the population being Mexican American, whereas only one white guy in the administration when I got promoted to the administrative position, and that was me. I was the Anglo, and then everybody else was Mexican American in the management team. But our entire student body in South Texas was, and Al being one of those, but he was an absolutely brilliant artist, manager. And the financial picture, while it sounds like it's little as a little junior college, with our population base of 85% Mexican American, you can imagine how much financial aid we ran through that school. A significant financial aid program. And his staff was the biggest staff on campus, right? And they loved him. And on one day, he would be the absolute most autocratic, you will do this. And the next day, he was sitting there with 14 people around him having coffee. And he just went back and forth. And I said, how do you do that? Why are you even taking this MBA program? You don't need it. You're absolutely marvelous. He was an artist as a manager. You might have been exposed to that in your own life, where you look at these people and say, wow, that's beautiful to watch them work. And on the other hand, there's people that are struggling. I'm not saying that all science managers struggle with it, because they're just as good at numbers and routines and linear thinking as Al was in nonlinear thinking. But where is that movement? And today, with the world just falling apart on us and being so chaotic and turbulent, East becoming West, West becoming East, you know, diversity stuff going on, I'm not sure that there's enough scientific theories and rules and regulations to help us. You know, I mean, read Hershey Blanchard's stuff in the 1 Minute Manager, and that's great stuff, but what happens when those 6 little rules for that 1 minute don't work? And what happens when you get presented with another set of events that weren't in the book? And what happens when you have a teacher that gave you 14 financial ratios but left out 6 pieces of data when you were supposed to put the formulas together and give them an answer? And you still got to come up with some effective decision processes? We're in trouble. If all that you're doing is dealing with these ratios and expecting somebody to give you complete sets of data to fill in all the blanks. Doesn't quite work that way. You know, so therein lies some of that art, but some of that science. And we go back and forth on that. One more piece of that, and then I'll stop and do the questions, comments, observations thing again. As we look at this movement back and forth between science and art, I would offer to you a question about expertise as faith and belief. Because even if we look at the artist mentality, you know, a lot of times we look at those figures out there, and for me it's like, okay, man, when John Lennon plays guitar, it's like, wow, that's really nice. You know? Maybe somebody else different for you, or maybe you like poetry, or maybe you like a piece of sculpture, or maybe it's like a management, or maybe there's an accountant that you see. It's like, man, that person really does. And so your faith in, your belief in that expertise, is that art or is that science? I don't know that, you know, but you need to think about that a little bit. When I talk about power and influence and authority, we may talk about that in here or not. So that's just some raging comments on the first article. So comments, questions, observations. I hope that you would, somebody may have read that or somebody may have not read that and listened to what I just said and jump in the middle of that. Yes, sir.
Well, just observation. When I read the article, I've been out of manufacturing for many years, and so it brought back some ideas and things that I did that never attached labels to. And so
which is what happens when we get in this environment.
Yeah.
You learn that you already knew it.
Yeah. And that was kind of, well, maybe not knew it, but was able to label it and see some of the things I did that might have been workable, and certainly workable today. And it was just intuitive. It was just something that, as I went through the article, was kind of an observation.
An intuitive kind of thinking. Other Hermas and Clackamas, y'all. Yes, sir. Right at the back, we've got somebody in the grand.
Yeah,
going once, going twice.
Towards the end of the article, it starts talking about the necessity of personal humility versus professional will. Kind of what you were talking about with your colleague down in UT Pan American, being autocratic and at the same time being relational. Who would you say is the best theorist out there that kind of is able to put those together and blend that?
In the academic business sense, I'm going to throw lots of names at you of people that I think get at that message in a lot of different ways, because I've met some of them and some of the work that I've read of them. Warren Bennis is absolutely great. Sorry for those who've been in my classes before. Barry Posner, so B-E-N-N-I-S, Barry Posner, P-O-S-N-E-R. More recently, I've been telling stories about another man that came into my life, a guy named Ron Porzio, but you're not going to get to read anything about him. I just share with you stories. He is the assistant hospital administrator for the Spokane Veteran Hospital for a number of years. I met him because he was my daughter's karate teacher, and he and I did this, you know, we had this sparky mind meld, and we loved to work out with each other. But he's an absolutely marvelous, brilliant manager in a very, very chaotic, turbulent environment. And the humility factor and his willingness to serve other people. One of the examples, and I learned this story not from Ron, but from somebody else. He actually got in a lot of trouble with the Veterans Administration because he was accepting clients in the Spokane hospital that were actually Montana clients. And he says, I'm not sending a troubled veteran away. But they said, well, you can't do that because that's their hospital. And he said, yeah, but they're not serving him or her. Or they won't give him the medications he or she needs. Or he had to wait too long. And he says, they're not walking away from my hospital because that's my job. So the humbleness and his willingness to do what was right in spite of what the rules and regulations were saying. Absolutely just marvelous story. Another one that I've just recently heard from in my son's new job with Washington Trust Bank. They had him in Spokane for some new cadre leadership training. And interestingly enough experience, the speaker was from the president, the ex-president of the undergraduate school that my son went to, and that was Whitworth College in Spokane. And please keep in mind, and I will say this till you're sick of hearing it, that this is not a church school. It's not my job to compel values on you. If I were teaching from a church school or any other kind of particular value-based school, it would be my job to try to influence your behavior given the values of that institution. We are a state institution, and it's my job to make sure that you get exposed to multiple points of view and you value and choose your own behaviors. And Billy was quite intrigued by listening to Bill Robinson's talk about leadership. And there wasn't one single issue of the faith-based thing going on, which is not the case for some of the writers today. For example, Covey's work on 7 principles, highly effective. I mean, he's great stuff. But if you know some of the background of that, you start feeling some fairly deeper influences that are coming at you that I'm not sure that all of you want. But Billy was absolutely amazed that none of that happened from Bill Robinson. But what did happen was that he talked about humility. And he says, I want to share with you some of what I did when I first got to Whitworth. And you make a judgment as to whether or not you think this is good leadership or not. And they had to renovate the presidential mansion, because it hadn't been lived in for about 10 years. And it was folks from the physical plant that did it. The lowest paid, least respected, nobody cares about them workers at that. And he had several picnics at that house and had a series of meetings saying, I want you to tell me what you think we need to do to make this school better. And he continued to do that about every 3 months, just to call those people back and say, am I listening? Did we do this? Did we not? I mean, wow, that's amazing. How many presidents really take the time to listen to who's on the bottom? Who are the people that are putting your organization together? Tom Peters called it MBWA, management by wandering around. How many bosses do you have that really you've seen on a regular enough basis that can even tell you what's going on in their own organization? They can tell you numbers, but they don't know what's happening at the pulse of that organization. So those are some, and I'm going to shift away from what I just told you about the faith-based stuff and tell you that there's another couple of people that I would recommend, but it has nothing to do with, business writers, but it's certainly a couple of people that have impacted me lately. I'm intrigued by one of them because it has some connections with some times when I was 18 and being in Vietnam. And I don't know if it's just because I still struggle with that and I got post-traumatic stress disorder and still crazy. I don't know. When I moved to Lewiston, I worked out with a Vietnamese man that was an Aikido master, and he calmed me like maybe it's because he just beat the crap out of me every time we worked out. I was too tired to do anything, Whoever said Aikido was a gentle art was crazy. And more recently, my son turned me on to a Buddhist monk to read some of his stuff. He's another Vietnamese named Thich Nhat Hanh. And he's got a book of readings called Peace is Every Step. And there's another Buddhist monk that's a lady named Pema Chodron. And you asked this question about the paradox between getting out there and getting the job done, and you've got to almost be arrogant enough to say, I'm leading you. I lost my microphone again. Thank you, John. And then on the other hand, at what point does that sort of hard-charging, hard-driving arrogance turn everybody in the organization off? And so you've got this humility of Bill Robinson where you're willing to be down at the bottom. And both of these authors, in the last 2 weeks, I've read stuff that they've said about, on one hand, you do need to have an attitude. On the other hand, you better give it up.
Can you spell Thich-Nhat-Hanh?
Thich-Nhat-Hanh. He's got a multiplicity of writings out there, and if you know anything about the peace movements, and I didn't know this, and as a veteran who's been there, who's changed his opinions about all that, I'm surprised that I didn't know this, but Thich-Nhat-Hanh is about 80 years old, and he was one of the most instrumental people in some of the Paris peace talks to get people to recognize that this stuff that we were doing in Vietnam was not too cool. You know, so he's an amazing, amazing individual. But that's a personal point of view. Where that fits with the humility of people in leadership, I'm not so sure it's too far away. You know, the stories that I can tell you about having met Warren Bennis and Barry Posner and the way that they live their lives. You know, Barry Posner is a $20,000 a day consultant. And we got him to come to Lewis Clark State College for a plane ticket and $500. It's amazing. This guy doesn't have to come talk to a bunch of undergraduate students. How humiliating was that for him? No, that's not the point. Here's a man that said, my job is about changing the lives of people around leadership. You bet I'll come to LCSC. You know, 3 years ago, we were able to get Paul Dolan here at EOU, major, major corporate wine executive, used to run Fetzer Wines, then he turned to run Mendocino Wines. He runs his own vintner companies now. And here's a guy running one of Fortune 500 companies, Brown-Forman. You know, they were the corporate conglomerate that ran Fetzer Wines, and yet he comes here for next to nothing. It took us a little while to get into the circuit, but here's another $20,000 a day speaker, and we paid him $5,000. And he comes and talks to EOU students. The people that you see that behave close to the bottom are the people that we want to listen to and model our behaviors off of. Other comments, other questions about that first article? You still out there? You awake? Glazed over yet? It's a flat world. I don't know. Go read Friedman. I'm not going to draw pictures on the, maybe make two things back and forth, but think about this. Those of you that are coming to us from this background of the business administration degrees, this will not be a far stretch for me for you to graphically think about what I'm fixing to say. If you have trouble with this, email me, talk to your colleagues. But the flat world phenomena moves us from this tall pyramid, lots of lines and spaces in the business. You know, this thing called span of control. You know, you're working with 3 people in your job or 10 people. This flattened thing out there, you moved from a span of control is that now then instead of having a department of 5, you've got 50. Well, I'm not so sure that it really has to do with, this globalization factor and East-West, and that maybe that is just simply a scientific phenomena, and that in that older world of the tall pyramid, we had heterogeneous or multiple kinds of contact points, and no, I couldn't control 50 of them because I had 5 people, all that thought differently and behaved differently. It just simply was an impossibility, scientifically, to get it all together. So the tall worked. And now they're saying it's flat. Well, why? Because of the multiplicity of diversity? No. But if you think about the efficacy or the efficiency or the effectiveness of this flattened structure, and now then I got 50 people reporting to me, what if all 50 of those were just as diverse as the 5 that used to report to me? I'm in serious trouble. right? But what if all 50 think, act, look at the world in the same way? An entirely homogeneous grouping. You bet it can be flat. You know, I would offer to you the paradox that we're facing with something called Japanese management, you know, which has been touted to us as being the democratic participative phenomenon in the world. Be careful. Now, that literature comes to us based on a man named Bill Ouchi, O-U-C-H-I. That's this publish or perish phenomena in an academic world. If we don't publish, we perish. Ouchi was going out there as a Japanese, writing about Japanese businesses, and as long as he could get access to the companies that let him publish the research, they let him keep on coming back. But he better say some good things about them. And he said participative management. Now think about that for a moment. Japan is a feudal society, still is. Talk to the children that are coming to us from Japan today. Talk to the children of the late 60s and 80s, much similar to America, and ask them what it was like to behave there, and ask them if they thought it really was participative management. Shintoism is a religion of honoring and respecting your elders, and they can call it participative management, and they're listening to the floor, but when the boss speaks, when E.F. Tutton talks. And in Japan, I'm telling you that when the bosses said things, that's the way they did. It would be a lot like me saying when I was in Marine Corps boot camp that we had democratic management. Right. You know, I don't think so. And those of you that are familiar with the NAI sport world would recall one of my stories from my previous school, and the infamous coach, Ed Sheff, 13, 14, 15 years of NAIA World Series baseball championships. I'll guarantee you that that man was not a democratic manager on the field. But they loved him. But the paradox is, this flattened structure, you look at that Ed Sheff's baseball team and think democratic management, think flattened structure. Well, you bet it was flattened because he had 50 ball players every year that was begging to play with him, that all looked and talked and thought and behaved exactly alike. Pretty easy to manage that, right? I know exactly what to do. I don't have to think very, oddly. It's an odd phenomena, and it's very paradoxical to think about that. Again, to the Japanese versus American phenomena, on one hand, we've got Japan being touted as the democratic place of business, but it's coming to us from religions of Confucianism and Shintoism and honoring the elders, and it's extremely autocratic and central command controlled. On the other hand, we've got America, right, who is supposedly the democratic nation, but this man that I told you about earlier, Bill Scott, one of the books that he wrote was a book called Organizational America, and he said that business in America was the most autocratic, centralized, dictatorial form of governance, not of management, of governance in the entire world. Once you are involved in the corporate structure, it is them. So you've got this democratic nation being managed autocratically, and you've got this autocratic nation being touted to be managed democratically. I'm confused, and yet we're supposed to think about interacting on an even playing field. Friedman's not totally wrong when he talks about this flattened world, but I think much of it has to do with this paradox, of the autocratic versus the collective decision processing. That's one piece that I'd offer to you. The second little piece of that is to think about the demographic shifts around the world, East becoming West, West becoming East. The diversification process, America, the melting pot, is that right or not? Oh, no, wait a minute. Excuse me, but we've got this thing going on down in the southern part of our borders and stuff, and immigration. And it's like, I want to say, well, who made the rules here anyway? And maybe we should have asked our Native American folks to start imposing constraints on how the rest of us got into the country. No, it doesn't belong to them. It belongs to us. I'm sorry. I'm confused again, Who's becoming what? Where is the playing field? Who made the rules and regulations anyway? Women couldn't vote, but somewhere along the line, somebody said, I don't believe the rules, we're going to change them. The blacks had to be on the back of the bus, and somebody along the line said, I'm sorry, but I don't like those rules, we're going to change them. We're going to go to South America, and we're going to talk about the Sandinista and the Chiapas regions and the migrant, you know, the little coffee farm growers on those. And somebody said, excuse me, but I don't like the way things are. I'm going to change them. And then you got a man named Paulo Freire, a Catholic priest, who was defrocked by the Catholic group and almost kicked out of Mexico because he had something called the pedagogy of the oppressed and said, I'm going to teach illiterate people how to read. And that scares the heck out of people that are in control, because now I got all these people that know what's going on and they can read. I'm confused again. Who gets to make the rules and who doesn't? You know, so you've got major, you know, demographic shifts in what's happening. Some of them are not quite so fast as others. I'm sorry, but the glass ceiling is still there, you know, and you think that women are making it into management, and how come it is that there's still less than 2% of women are CEOs in major Fortune 500 companies? Yeah, but they'll tout, we've got some more people on that, and they'll rise two salaries exponentially above everybody else's and then throw that into the statistical database, submit that to the government, say we don't have a problem. You take those two astronomically high women's salaries out of the database and you still have salary differentials. We men have a real problem letting you women join the ranks up here, you know. It's crazy out there. One more that doesn't seem to be here at all, but it's kind of in this flattened world phenomena. I think about the concept of outsourcing. Now this could get politically you like it or not. You say, no, we got to save jobs for America. I don't remember the name of this movie, but there's a movie about outsourcing where a guy has this call center, and his boss calls him in and it says, you've really done a good job, and you're going to get promoted and all that kind of stuff. The bad news is that I'm firing everybody in your call center, but you get to go to India and create another call center. And at first he's saying, no, I'm going to protect all these jobs. And it's like, you can't do that to me. And the next scene in the movie, you see him in India, you know, teaching the people how to be a call center. And he's trying to teach them how to speak Texan and Alabamese and all that, because that's where all the clients are calling from. And that's an interesting. And finally, the workforce says, excuse me, but maybe we should teach you how to speak our language. You know, so you got this interesting thing going on. But he's a good guy, you know, and he takes care of people. Right? And he does it again. He creates this outsourcing center, you know, that's no longer an American job, working for an American company, making a ton of money, and he does such a good job that the next scene is that you have him coming in again and saying, guess what, we're going to fire all your workforce again, and we're going to send you to China. You know, and then the upshot of the movie is that he chooses not to go to China. But somebody else in the company did. So, I mean, do you like that or not? I don't know. Let me tell you another story about that, and then I'll stop. Okay, I was a leadership speaker for the regional Rotary execs a couple of years ago, and I got a chance to sit at the head table with all the. Now, if you know anything at all about Rotary, you know that the people that are way up in Rotary sometime are pretty heavy hitters in the corporate world, and so we had, you know, retired execs in several walks of life from the corporate world in the Seattle area sitting at the head table. And we had this other sort of dissident thinker like myself, but I was trying to be nice and not talk about all this stuff, right? But this guy started talking about how bad it was to outsource jobs and that the American people were losing our wages. And this is not wrong about that, right? And this one automobile executive said, time out, buddy. And everybody at the table got really quiet. And he said, I'd just like you to know that Honda just opened up about 7 plants in the Midwest and just hired 65,000 Americans. Now let's talk about outsourcing. And it's like, wow. Now you think about this sort of globalization and who's contributing and who's doing what. I don't know, how many jobs have we lost to outsourcing and downsizing? A lot. Got some other stories about that, but here is at least one story where a foreign company came in and employed at really good wages 65,000 Americans. That's a lot of folks. Maybe the number's a little bit off, but interesting. Comments, questions, observations. If you haven't read the articles, you certainly need to do so, and then give me comments and feedback later on too.
about something.
Yes.
And I'm going to play a little bit of devil's advocate here, I guess. But, you know, in this outsourcing, I wonder, because I've been looking at this, how things shift in business.
Mhm.
Things shift from there. And, I mean, not just with call centers going to India, because that's affected me with work with QuickBooks on their point of sale system. That is actually outsourced now to India. But also with, for my time that I spent in Walla Walla, the migrant workers, they're filling something, and so it becomes more or less like there's this opening, not necessarily of a hierarchy, but there's a hole in something that needs to be done that is being filled almost automatically by someone who has those skill levels, the set
And
culture,
can do it at that cost.
and can do it at that
Competitively.
cost, so that everybody actually benefits from that.
Right. Now, one of the things that we're hearing about that is not to worry. Now, I'm not so sure that I trust the people that tell me not to worry, but one of the things that they say about the not to worry phenomena is the shift in the money or the individual money getting capacity of individuals in the workforce in America that is no longer being reliant upon that level of skill production work, because they are now knowledge-based workers. And so they're selling their heads instead of their hands. So I used to sell my hands. You sold my hands to them because they give them to you cheaper, but now then you buy my head, right? And a guy named Harlan Cleveland has talked about that in terms of knowledge explosion. I'm kind of not convinced of that quite yet, and I'll use the data processing field as an example of that. If you think about where the biggest talent of outsourcing is in the world, it comes from three places: China, and the technology degrees in China, Ireland, and there's a significantly high number of individual consultant and outsourced IT workers from Ireland, and Romania. An example, very concrete, is that at the time that I redesigned my website, the going price just to look at them and to convert them was $5,000. I had a young man that was getting his master's degree in the IT area. The average wage in Romania at that time was $100 a month. I paid the guy $500, which sounds like I'm really being abusive, and maybe I was, right? But I paid him $500, which was for him 5 months of salary to redesign my website. Everybody wins. And unbelievably, that man asked me questions until I was saying, Radu, just shut up. Go fix it. But he wouldn't let me go. It's like, well, what do you want that piece of information for? And where's that one going to connect with you? And to show you how brilliant he was, Radu finally ended up in America working for an oil company doing database management. They paid his way to Rice University to get an MBA, and it's like, here's Radu. Unfortunately, he's a loss to Romania because his wife and him now both are here. Whereas I've got some other friends that went back to Romania, which was great because they came and learned a lot of stuff and went back to share with them. But, I don't know about that to say that all Americans that are losing their capacity to make money with here are getting their capacity to make money here. Not quite ready to hear that yet. I don't know. Here's another one for you that's even a more interesting story. Did any of you know that McDonald's at one point was outsourcing the call in? Amazing. It is absolutely bizarre. You drive to the drive-up window and you were talking to somebody in India that was placing your order, but 20 feet later they're going to fill it in Spokane McDonald's. It didn't work, Yes, sir.
Since I'm a software engineer, that's one big thing in software engineering. In fact, I have a brother-in-law who manages software engineering groups in India, and he's here. And I've worked on projects where part of the work was being done overseas and here. And the net comes down to, if the company isn't well managed, doesn't have a good software engineering process, it doesn't work.
Right.
And so you have to have a good management structure and a good process to be able to take things from here to India and back, for
Right.
example. So from that point of view,
So if they can do it cheaper and better, it works.
But well, the key is the management. And so right now, I'm not worried about my job because there are so many poorly managed companies here in the U.S. who can't make it work, won't be able to do it cheaper. When they try it, if they're not well managed, they don't have a good engineering process in place, it costs more money.
Mm-hmm.
But the key is the management and the engineering process.
Right.
And it's a lot of poor companies with poor processes, especially smaller ones and
Right.
stuff like that. So they can't afford to try it. It'll fail. If they do, they'll be out of business. But companies that have good engineering processes and good management can do it, and they can take advantage of it.
The scientific and process-oriented stuff will hold supreme in that situation.
Well,
Your
yeah,
capacity to manage
if
it.
you don't have the science part down, it falls apart.
Yeah.
But in managing, there is the art part of it too.
For me, I'm not quite ready to say that that's it and it's entirely, because if we go back, and again, those of you that have taken more classes in economics and you think about free market theories and stuff like that, I think that if there truly was free market around the world, what you're saying would be entirely true without question, and that would be it. If the markets were driven by free markets to where whoever could produce the best product for the lowest price, and if I can do it cheaper with outsourced people or immigrant labor, then so be it. You can't do it as well as I do. I win, you lose. You know, you either go out of business or learn how to do it as well as I do. But I don't believe that there's a free market in the world. I believe that every single one of them are politically governed by constituent interests. And it depends on how political and how strong that intervention process is to muck up with your management system. You know, so that's at least a piece of it. But I think you're dead on target that if we don't have that, the latest book that I'm reading now is called Management and the Riddle, or The Monk and the Riddle, or something like that. And I'm just now starting it, but it's a novel. But there's a venture capitalist, and he's talking about that very thing. He's saying that's what's driving the success of the capacity for these companies to be successful, is their ability to understand the system and the engineering and the manufacturing processes where we don't have to trouble with that. Did your hand? I'm sorry, I'm kind of ignoring y'all. Are you okay out there? Are you listening? Are we here? Or we're all just insane and crazy down here? Or you have things to say to us?
We're all good in Hermiston.
We're all good here in Clackamas too.
All right, thanks. There was a hand back up here.
I had a question about what you were just saying, and sort of about what I was wondering about before, was that political element. If this free market and what's happening, what we're seeing right now is, you know, I can do this, or these people can do this better, cheaper, more efficiently, is happening because the political environment
Is shifting continually.
Yeah, well, it's allowing it to happen. I don't want to say allowing it, but it's sort of failed to not let it. I mean, the political element is sort of out the window. It's gone.
Well,
it's
but the
sneaking
controversy of that is that there's a position on that there are some people that think that either politically or corporately or capitalistically and sort of valued, saying we should do that as a private as opposed to the government should do it, and at what point did the government intervene or not intervene. So there's this complexity of where is there other intervention politically, should it be there or should it not? What about NAFTA? What about the immigration policies that are going on? And what about the folks that are, you know, questioning the immigration policy, but underneath that advocating the use of illegals because they get cheaper labor? So, I mean, I don't know what the answer is. There's a hand back here. maybe there can be some help to us.
Comment on the political and the free market aspect of that is this week the House considered a bill that was the Chinese, it's called the China currency bill, and it would adjust the American tariffs to compensate for China's undervalued currency, because everybody pretty much agrees that China is undervaluing their currency, which means that it's cheaper for them to export to us. So we've got an overvalued currency compared to theirs. So what
And it advantages them in an economic marketplace.
Yeah, exactly. So they're trying to compensate by raising the tariffs on China's imports to us.
And so does that make us bad players in a global market, or does it make us protective players in the American market?
And the other thing is there's concerns that it will violate the World Trade Organization. So
at least what they say.
What's the retaliation we face from that?
Yeah,
so,
interesting. My personal first reaction to that is that it's not going to mess around with World Trade Organization, because much of their policy is established by member nations, and they're not going to be messing around with who gets benefits from that. But that's interesting about that, you know. Here's another piece of that happened way back when Harley Davidson shifted from the ownership of that company by AMF, you know, the bowling ball company, pool table company, and they were about to shut them down and sell them out. And if that had happened, we wouldn't know Harley as it exists today. They were going to fold them. But Harley bought themselves from AMF. Now, whether you think that this is a good thing or not, in a very similar fashion, in a way of protecting Harley, because of all of their military history and their what some people call interlocking directorates, where the political, economic, church establishments all interact at a very high level. People sit on each other's boards of directors. And Harley had had multiple military contracts since its beginning of time. And at that point of time, when Harley bought itself from AMF, they were able to politically intervene into the system and extract 5-year moratorium on tax import on every bike that came from Japan. At a time when an average Harley was costing $12,000, the average comparable bike from Japan was costing $5,000. And in every Consumer Report magazine that came out, keep in mind that AMF had owned Harley Davidson, and their quality factors were oil coming out, bikes dying. Harley connoisseurs will tell you never buy a Harley that's got a VIN number from 1960-something to 1980. I don't care how good it's been reworked, it's going to fall apart. So wait until after Harley fixed its problems, right? They did some quality stuff. Contradictorily and paradoxically, the American motorcycle company at that time sent a bunch of executives to Japan to learn how to do quality control manufacturing process, you know, to come back and exacted this 5-year tariff import to where that bike that was then costing them $5,000 now cost them $10,000. Now then, you tell me which one you're going to buy. $5,000 Japanese bike? Yes. Compared to a $12,000 bike, and I'm going to get it simply because I like the sound. Or, for 5 years now, it's going to be the difference of $2,000. What am I going to buy? Put Harley on the map. And we can say that's a brilliant economic movement, or we can say that's not nice. They shouldn't have done that. In a free market economy, had the Japanese bikes been allowed to do what they did, the world would be different today as regard to Harley. Now we can extrapolate that and bring it forward to today's political environment and say, is this China thing a good thing, a bad thing? It's a decision you have to value and make yourself. And if it's a wrong one, then maybe we ought to talk to some more people about changing that. And if it's a right one, you can say, yep, I love it, you know. So I don't know. I don't have that answer, you know. But the world is changing. It is more of a global market than it used to be. I still think it's very politically governed by a lot. But fortunately, if we can do it right, you know, with the management processes, with the engineering processes that can ensure that there's some way of making it work better, then we can sort of circumvent some of this other, you know, personal baggage kind of stuff. Not to say that it's good or bad. So other comments on that article? See what I'm saying about the diversity of the folks here in this audience? It's like we get these multiple layers of the conversation and perceptions about what the articles are saying. I'm not going to say too much about green or not, but here's just the words that I wrote down as I went through that particular article. Green or greenwashing. Has anybody heard that concept, greenwashing? Or, and who benefits from anybody knowing that a company is green or not? There's a lot of folks that are making a lot of money, and it's not cheap to buy green. You know, I mean, if you buy products that last longer, that are made organic, it costs a lot more money to do that. And I'm not so sure that in a large corporate wealth creation that's good. Although there are people that are saying that the world is accepting it, is buying it, and in the long run it's more, quote, sustainable because I haven't torn up as much of the land, I haven't exhausted as many of the resources, and I can keep doing it longer. A little bit more expensive to do that, but some people are saying that that is converting itself into profit margins in companies that are willing to invest in that. So then we say, is that good or not? But here's a very... I'll tell you a story, and you have to go search it out and see if it's true or not. I could say it's devil's advocacy. I could say I honestly believe this or not. But one would ask a question about why Walmart spent some money doing what it did at a post-event. Now, what I'm going to tell you about is a story that I read last year about great leadership examples from Katrina. Okay? Obviously, a chaotic, turbulent, unbelievable mess down there. Now, there's all kinds of stories that you may hear about, all the way from political movement to economic movement to military intervention and not intervention and private forces doing security and things like that. But Walmart had one store manager that did an absolutely unbelievable thing. And it's touted as being a marvelous leadership example. And I don't disagree with this at all. Right? One of the Walmart stores in the Katrina stuff was absolutely devastated, right? And the walls were broken down and products were just rained on and done everything to. And this lady manager said, you know what? I can't make any money selling this stuff. It's going to cost us so much money to put this store back together, but I'm just going to take a bulldozer, push it all out into the parking lot and say free. And people came and got this stuff. You know, millions of dollars worth of inventory gone, but she couldn't have made any money from it because she couldn't sell it. Some of it's damaged, some of it. And I'm thinking, God, what a... And if you know Walmart's management structure, in spite of what you read, you know that it's a fairly top-down, control-oriented management system. And so for anybody to take the freedom, you talk about empowerment, this lady just saying, I'm going to make a command decision to do this. And Walmart then spent several $million advertising to the world that this lady did a wonderful thing. Now, there's many, many examples of how BP. How much have you read post-BP about how they really weren't the bad guys and they really are helping the environment and they really are doing this and it really wasn't their fault in the way? And that's what some people call greenwashing. The amount of money spent by an organization to convince the rest of the world that they really are environmentally friendly, right? Or sustainably friendly, or management friendly, right? Anybody see the movie Class Action? With John Travolta was a lawyer, okay? It's really about Beatrice Foods and General Mills, right? True stories where Beatrice Foods and General Mills were putting out toxic waste in the water systems around this one community, and there was people dying. Kids were getting leukemia, and Beatrice Foods and General Mills denied and denied and denied and denied, called EPA in, or Environmental Protection Agency. Oh, we're doing fine. Everything's good. We're meeting regulations. And then spent tons and tons of money advertising to the world that they're okay. and yet people were still dying, you know, from the toxic waste that they were putting. And that was another example of what some people would call greenwashing. And then you say, well, who benefits and who doesn't? The stockholders of Beatrice Foods and General Mills, who kept getting richer and richer and richer because their stock value was going up and up and up, but they were doing this and this and this. And so now then one has to ask the question, where's the line drawn between the legal actions of a corporation and what appears to be detrimental to a larger group of population? Who's benefiting? And so the question for me about the green stuff, let me give you another example of differentiated points of view, okay? Potlatch Forest Industries in Lewiston, Idaho. Anybody familiar with that? Now, if you drive 3 hours that way and have never been over there and you start driving down into that and you smell the mill and you think, oh, why did I ever live here for 25 years? And I love LeGrand, you know, but my wife still lives in Lewiston, so we go back and forth and back and forth. Now, once upon a time, I had a group of undergraduate students that studied, you know, the economic positioning of Potlatch Forest Industries and their pulp and paper division when they made whiteboard. You know what whiteboard is? Whiteboard is the stuff they make milk cartons out of. So they take lots of lumber and they throw it into these vats and muck it around a little bit and mush it up a little bit, and they make this stuff called whiteboard, and they make milk cartons, and they'd sell a ton of them in the Oriental markets, right? And so they did this study. Now, I don't know if it's a good one, accurate or not. It looked okay to me. You know, they had data to support that. They studied with, you know, they asked some scientists to give them some stuff, and it was a pretty formidable project for an undergraduate group of students. And the bottom line that they discovered was that, now you're going to think about these cost figures, those of you who are business students, right? That if, major question, PFI were willing to increase the production cost by 10%, which would mean a follow-through of that to their retail consumer of at least 10%, if they would engage in that 10% cost increase, that they could in place in those manufacturing processes a reduction of 90% of the toxicities in the whiteboard purification bleaching process. I'm talking about numbers here, immaterial of who's going to buy or not. That's an amazing figure. If somebody can start showing me that, now then, does that mean that PFI should incorporate that 10% cost? Or, no, excuse me, that's a governmental thing. The society wants these, you know, non-toxins. It's not PFI. So to hell with PFI, make the government pay for it. So government gets to give Potlatch 10% more money so that they can decrease the 90% toxicity, because the government and the people are the ones that care about that, not the stockholders. I don't know. You can go on and on with that. Now then, we get that argument a little bit more and say that, you know what, it ain't working. Because if I do that, I don't get whiteboard anymore. I get manila board. And I get a little giffer in that thing. It's not like a piece of wood is sticking up out of the manila board, but I've got this little chunk that looks like a piece of wood that didn't get completely bleached out and mulched up into paper. Do you understand what I'm talking about? And they would tell you, and the students discuss this, that the Chinese and the Japanese would refuse to buy the manila board with a giffer in it. They want a whiteboard, and they won't buy that. So you're not talking about a 10% increase in product that's going to be passed on to a consumer. You're talking about a total devastation of a market that 2,000 workers are dependent upon. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? Now let me throw another one at you. Now that one, you can think about, well, I don't know. Another study that was going on about the same time was that if you know about PFI and where they're at in Lewiston, the confluence is where the Clearwater comes together with the Columbia and then goes on in and eventually, the Snake, and then eventually becomes the Columbia. And right there at the Three Forks is a place, if you can believe this or not, it really is true. There's a pipe, an effluence pipe that comes from about 2 miles upriver where Potlatch is, that dumps in the confluence. The fishermen hate that because fish die. But here's the thing about that. It's a matter of an increase of the temperature of the effluence pipe and an increase and a decrease in the toxic effluents that they're putting out that would save maybe 50,000 fish a year. I was saying, get over it. You know, it's like you're going to lay off 20 or 2,000 or maybe half of the workforce because it's going to increase that much cost and you have to lay them off to save 50,000 fish, which is not going to make a significant difference in anybody's marketplace economy. But the fishermen say, yes, it's different. And the environmentalists and the greenies are saying, that's evil. Make them quit it. I don't know. Make them quit 90% toxicities. Now, I think in my mind, that's just a personal opinion, I see one as being worth fighting for because 10% versus 90% of toxicities. And if we can talk about a marketing, an educational program to say, you know, folks, you're going to get a differentiated product, but look at what we're doing for the world, as opposed to saving 50,000 fish. That's not changing anybody's lives. It was actually less than that. 2 degrees less in temperature and a few less chemicals in particulates per thousand. And say, I'm not, maybe it's just because I'm not a fisherman. Those of you that are outdoorsmen are probably saying, Jerry, they need to fix that fish problem, you know. So I don't know. So anyway, comments, questions, observations about the greening thing. You know? Help me out here, folks. You got to wake up. Anybody alive out there? How about y'all out there, Hermiston? I heard some folks that were from the agriculture and the other side of life, or another side of life. It would seem to me like those of you that have a lot more background in the ag world would have something to offer to this greening thing. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so Dr. Ramey. So I'm
Gerry's
interested in the marketing aspect is what's interesting to me, and I just see it all since the buzzword for everything anymore is green and environmentally friendly and sustainable and all those buzzwords. You'd think that marketing could really run with it, and we kind of learned about corporate social responsibility in one of our classes last year. I was like, Steve, and I'm going the long route. And you can kind of put a little pressure on your competitors by utilizing some of these techniques to improve your product.
I would share you with some of the stuff that we learned from Paul Dolan of previously of Fetzer Wines. One of the things that we learned about the wine industry in California, it was probably one of the more corporate level cutthroat business environments out there. It's a bunch of wealthy folks that make and sell wine. An example in our own region here out of Walla Walla is the Leonetti brothers out of Walla Walla, and they started selling $20 wine, and eventually now that you have to be on an invited list to get a $100 bottle of wine from Leonetti, you know, and it's like wealthy stuff. But here was a guy, Paul Dolan, who said, you know, environment is important. You know, organic is important because I don't want to hurt people anymore, and too many sulfites and too many nitrates and stuff like that is important. So let's see what we can do about that. And at the time, Fetzer was probably around a $17, $18 bottle of wine. Now, you go to the wine stores now, Fetzer still is deriving great benefit out of what Dolan did for that company, and yet he left in '94. But you can buy a good bottle of Fetzer for about $8 or $9. It's extremely drinkable wine, you know. But in the meantime, he did this whole thing about sustainability and what he calls the E3 formula. Those of you that have had this in class might have heard about it as something called the triple bottom line. You know, you make money, you be nice to people, and you protect the planet. And Dolan said we can make a ton of money doing all three of those things. Unfortunately, my personal opinion is that in 1994, when he left Fetzer, he didn't do so voluntarily. Brown Foreman did not like the mix of the E3 formula, and they said, you're spending too much money on this environment stuff. He had produced an administrative building at Fetzer Wines that actually produced more energy than it consumed. You know, it had all that, you know, the stuff in the bottom, and it produced green plants, and all the waste went down, and it did this, and it's got this much insulation, and it's pretty an interesting thing. Now, the other thing, I'll keep going, but go ahead.
What was the second one of the triple bottom line?
Okay. Economics, make money. Environment, protect the planet. Equity, be nice to people. And that's his E3 formula. When Dolan was the CEO and chief vintner, he implemented a policy set to all of his managers that said, if you can't do this, you don't work for my company. It's that important. Every truck that they bought from the point that he took over was biodiesel. The shipment of every bit of their product back and forth became a little bit more green. He then implemented an insourcing project to where, now, if you know about the wine industry, you know, what percentage of it do you label as pure and what, and if there's a lot of it from there, you can't call it whatever. You have to change that label. But he was willing to say that, yes, we do get X amount of grapes from them, and they put stuff on them, right? And he said, no, we're not going to buy from you anymore. Which did what to his raw material sources? Because if they go organic, if they go this other way, it costs them more. It takes longer. The European model of winemaking is that they use much less of those kinds of things. There's a lot less sulfites and nitrates in the production process, but it costs more. Paradoxically speaking, you can buy a Spanish wine for $8 that is more organic than a $20 organic wine in America. Wacky. In Washington, there's people that get $300,000 or $400,000 subsidies to go corporate and get paid not to produce, but somebody that's got a 20-acre farm next door to them has to pay a $100,000 licensing fee to get to be labeled organic, and it takes them this much to do that. Who's making money? Yes, sir, go ahead.
Is this kind of like the Ben & Jerry's thing that you were talking about?
Yes and no. You know, I have some quirks about Ben & Jerry's. You gotta follow Ben & Jerry's through to today. If you could read Ben & Jerry's up to the point in time where they were, again, marketing themselves as that organic, you know, no growth hormones and all that kind of stuff, and it's all that wonderful, and then follow Ben & Jerry's through the time where they said, we're not good at, as you said, management processes. We're going to have to hire some other managerial talent. One of the first managers that they hired on their way to more productive management processes was a prior executive of National Rifle Association. And it's like, wait a minute. I mean, that's a value-based thing, but it did hold true that the values and the managerial ethos and expertise of that manager said, this is the way I don't do that. Prior to that, they also, in that organic green thing, were very humane and had capped executive salaries to $150,000. They said that no matter where you work for Ben & Jerry's, $150,000 is a great enough salary that you can buy the most expensive house in that town, still be the executive, but it's not so far out of line with the workforce. That first one started the wave towards those $1 million salaries, even at Ben & Jerry's. 3 or 4 years after that, there was an article that came out about where they were getting milk from growth hormone cows in Texas. And it says, no, wait a minute. At some point, I didn't get that that was the historical evolution of Fetzer wines when Dolan was there. But this point of at what point Ben & Jerry tells the world, this is who we are, and they behave in a different way, I kind of have a problem with that. You know, I don't know, but that's just my opinion. Everybody needs to kind of explore we have a database at EOU called Mergent Online. You can call the librarians or email them or whatever, and you can get lots and lots of information about companies about that. But I hope I didn't bust a bubble, but I think you're dead on target to compare the two. because they're really similar in that organic movement, but one sort of did this kind of thing, and I don't believe that Dolan has done that. He left Fetzer because they wanted him to do that, and then he went to Mendocino Wines and tried to replicate the process. You know, Bogle, no, it's not Bogle, Bonterra. If you're a wine drinker, Bonterra is another organic line that was one of the subsidiaries of one of the organizations that Dolan worked with, and it was completely organic too. But they're more expensive. They cost more. You know why? Because I don't know. But the point being that Dolan was willing to increase the cost, but paradoxically, his overall production cost went down, and he was able to sustain that as long as he was the CEO. But he knew that it had a systemic and outreach effect on his incoming sources and also his people that purchase the product. So once again, the comment that the lady in Hermiston made about marketing in this environment that seems to want to hear about that is that, hey, that's good stuff. I'm going to use it. I'll take every advantage I can get. You know, does that make me bad? I mean, bad because I'm making money off of marketing green? For Dolan, I would say no. For Ben & Gerry's, I'm still, to me, I don't think I've seen the end of that one yet. I don't know whether it's right or wrong, but I have some concern that there is evidence that Ben & Gerry is selling ice cream that's labeled non-growth, where it's clearly evident that the incoming resource is coming from growth hormone cows in Texas. I'm not saying it's wrong. I mean, some people say that that's okay. Lots of people drink growth hormone milk, and they don't die from it. You know, so it's not necessarily a bad thing. But they shouldn't tell the world that they're doing it if they are, or if they are not, or vice versa. Yes, sir.
I was just going to comment about Ben & Gerry's. I just heard recently that they pulled the all-natural advertisement off their product because of growth hormone. And
you know what? They just went up 10% in my mind by doing that. Just being honest about what we do. One of my other heroes, Barry Posner, his second major book was one called The Credibility Factor. And he basically says we've lost our faith in our leadership, both politically and corporately, because they're not doing what they tell us anymore. We don't have any faith. Starting from the Texas savings and loan scandals is like, they said they were doing this, and then they did that. Enron said that they were protecting retirements, and lots of people lost retirements, and 20 executives got 4 new $20 million houses. I was like, well, I'm sorry, but you told me you were doing this, and you're doing that. I'm not sure that's very cool. Just be honest. I can live with an executive making a lot of money to produce wealth for a lot of people. There's nothing wrong with that. This is America. We are the place to where opportunity is out there, and no individual should ever be deprived of that. That's not wrong. It's not illegal. But when I start taking it away from you, and I'm responsible for you, I have an issue with that. You know, but that's a personal opinion, and you certainly may not have that. Comments, questions, observations? Three down, one to go. Go ahead.
Gerry?
Yes, hang on. Let's catch this one and I'll come back to you. Go ahead. Hermiston?
I'd also like to point out that, you know, there can be cost savings in being green as well. At the farm and the dairy I work at, we use the effluent from the dairy as fertilizer for our feed, and we save millions of dollars by doing that. So there can be, if you're creative with being green, there can be cost savings too.
That's amazing, and I wish that we would explore that a great deal more. Those of you that are here on this campus might know the name Marilyn Levine. She is our dean of our Arts and Sciences program here. And whether Marilyn did this thing that I'm fixing to tell you about or her husband did it, one of the more brilliant economic development studies that I've seen was presented to some of the economic movers and shakers in Lewiston, Idaho. And it revolved around potlatch forest industries and the fishing industry and the wine industry. And he presented a plan to where some of the very tanks that were producing the toxins and the waste at PFI could be turned into some of the fishing industries things, and it's somewhat similar to where you're saying, where some of this is being used for that, and he had it graded to where catfish tanks and sturgeon tanks and this tank, and the worst product from one went into the other to be part of the production of the next level. And it was all this marvelously efficient thing that, and then that would go into something else, and somehow, I don't know how the wine industry got into that, but it was like right now, for about a 2 to 3 mile downwind, upwind stretch from PFI, they have been able to, they've stopped wine producing, and not a lot of people know this, but prior to Prohibition, wines that came out of Lewiston, Idaho were competing in terms of national competitions with award-winning wines out of California. So something about that region was absolutely great that we've lost. And there was this brilliant economic study that talked about how we could sort of maximize the gain of what all, if we work together. So other interesting stories. But we don't think that way. We think myopically. We look at this little piece and don't even think about, well, if it's connected to that, what would happen? You know, so thank you for that. There was a hand up here or over there, or did we lose it?
Observation about something that you said, that I was recently part of a small business group, and we shared a lot of different books about growing your business, what makes a good business, how to make money in your own business. And the observation that I had was that there was one theme that went across all the authors, and it was that don't take all the money for yourself. Give part of that money back. Make it a win-win situation, so that if you have this idea on how to make money, but you can also make money for this person who's going to do a part of it, do it. Because you're also, you're at that point, you're giving to them also.
And they're going to play with you a lot longer.
And you're recruiting them to buy into this deal.
Even if that particular money was not given to some externality, but left within the framework of the company and the contingency monies to sustain its need to keep on growing.
Or even being given to a common cause.
Well, there you go. One of the latest rounds of Chamber of Commerce kinds of things, when they were saying, you know, the government should be responsible for job creation. The government shouldn't be borne on the backs of the companies. And wait a minute, who's creating the jobs anyway? Is it the government or is it the companies? And they actually, you know, of course, this is listening to NPR, and some of you may not like to listen to NPR, you know, but there were some studies, and you always have to listen to both sides of the studies. But there were some numbers that were thrown out that several of these companies with Chamber of Commerce involvement were saying it's not our responsibility to do these job creations because we don't have any money to do that. But they found out that these companies that were saying that had contingency funds, that the very money that they were asking the government to bail them out of, they could have re-employed hundreds and hundreds of people because the money was in the bank. And so that you have to question about. Here's another example that I bring to you from Warren Bennis, who is one of my leadership gurus. This was in '95, and he touted several companies that were like that, but I will give you one, and it was Levi Strauss. Now, Levi Strauss has since had some trouble engaging with this, and what happened in '95 has happened at least one more time with them as a result of their contracts with Walmart. They fought and fought and fought to get their product line into Walmart, and they were able to give them a preferred price to do so. And the minute that they did that, within that next iteration of the buying process, Walmart came back and said, we're going to cut your price again or we don't play. And they said, okay, we're going to play, and ended up firing a lot of people because they had to, or they said they had to. The example that I'm going to give you is more in this example of high executive compensation. Now, this is 1995, and that's 15 years ago. And you think about what's going on today, and the problem has compounded itself in terms of high executive compensation. You may or may not agree with that, you know, but this story that I will tell you, and Bennis will, I don't even remember the name of the article, but he had several big companies that had done very similar things, and they rewarded chief executive officer performance with 3-month bonus payments. And in the Levi Strauss example was that one executive laid off almost the entire workforce in one of his plants, about 1,200 people. And for that 3-month period, his bonus was almost to the penny the salaries and benefit packages for the 1,200 people that he laid off. Now you think about that. Now if we reward a contract for producing a bottom line, then yeah, you had a contract that said, you produce this, I'll give you this. I got it, I understand. Giving money to others, giving money, okay, maybe that money for those 12,000 people could have saved the jobs of 15,000 across all of the employment workforce, and I got to do it. If I can't cut costs around these corners, I'm going to lose 15,000 jobs. I'm going to say 12,000, I'm sorry. I'm going to save 15 for you. But to take the money from 12,000 and to put it in the pocket of one, I'm not convinced that that's a sound economic decision for the health and well-being of the entire company. It definitely helped one person, but I can't be convinced personally, and you may disagree with that it helped Levi Strauss in its entirety. That's the kind of thing that's a value-based decision that I think we need to think about. Here's an example of how that causes us trouble globally. George Bush Sr. had a conversation with the Japanese Prime Minister during his reign, right? Or their equal reigns. And the Japanese, now this is several years ago, right? You know, when he was the president. And the Japanese Prime Minister said, you have a problem with what you pay executives in America that makes it difficult for the rest of the world to work with you. Because that doesn't happen anywhere else in the world. And we're not so sure that that's very cool. So maybe you better get a handle on that. I don't think we did, you know. So I don't know. Comments, questions, observations. And then I had just one more to throw at you. The last article was quality control. Let me throw 3 names at you. Put them down if you're interested in the quality control movement. Those of you that are numbers people, that like science and math, you can probably play in this territory a little bit more. What is statistical process control? Deming, D-E-M-I-N-G, Edward Deming, the Japanese statistical process guru, although he was an American, and we sent him over there to help fix what we blew up in World War II. We wouldn't listen to him, but they did, and they beat our pants off in the world markets for the next few years because of what they learned from us. But we were stupid and didn't want to listen to Deming. Statistical process control. Crosby is another one, C-R-O-S-B-Y, and Juran, J-U-R-A-N. So when you look at this thing called statistical process control and how many defects per thousand and the mathematical potential of making a company better, because you understand how, oh, that machine has worked this many hours, and we know that if you put it on overtime, it's going to burn out. So the statistical variation of increasing production to make more money is only going to last so long before the machine blows up and the new machine costs more money, right? So when we look at all that, it's very complicated, but somebody needs to play in that territory, you know? And if you don't want to be the numbers person, you better be willing to delegate and hire somebody whose mind, and please, I know a lot of you are accountants, and I am not trying to insult the intelligence of accountants by saying that that's not what you do. It's not. Accountants keep a record of lots of other things, and I think that this is some of the issue with Arthur Andersen. You know, it wasn't this other part of what they did, because Arthur Andersen, as one of the, at that time, Big 8 accounting firms, began to diversify and actually hire management consultants that had different sets of expertise. This man named Tom Peters, who comes to us from McKinsey & Company, wrote In Search of Excellence and a bunch of other books, was actually a statistician out of MIT and Stanford. He brought to us mathematical thinking for business. I don't do it. I'm not going to play in that territory at all. But somebody needs to do it. Somebody needs to go into that operation. We think as a collective faculty at EOU and the business division, that's at the weakness that we don't have, that we have. We don't have a serious class in quantitative management, in operations management. You know, you think about operations as we're going to talk about relationships. No, I think we need to talk about mathematical formulas. How many hours is that machine going to last? And how many pieces of product can I produce out of that economically and make $1 out of it? You know, that kind of thing. The math is important. And that's kind of what I got out of that. What does it really cost to make a product? And how much money can you make and where do you put it? You know? Questions? Are you fried yet? I'm fried. I'm gone. All right. I will leave this mic on for a bit for anybody that's got questions. Those of you that are in Hermiston and Clackamas, you know, residual concerns that you have that you want to bring up, I'll be here for a few more minutes. I'm not going to shut down yet, but for all practical purposes, go read the articles. Thank you very much for a great night, for listening to me rant and rave. Thank you for talking and bringing about who you are to, and what you can share. Good. We'll see you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hermiston, Clackamas, you guys okay? Any residual?
I think we're all good here in Hermiston.
Okay, Clackamas? Okay, I'll leave it on for a few more minutes.
Everybody's good here?